እንግዲህ የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ በየጊዜው ሲካሄድ የተለያዩ ጉዳዮችን አጀንዳ አድርጎ ይመክራል። በተለይ ደግሞ በአህጉሪቱ ላይ እንደ ችግር የሚነሱ ነገሮችን በመለየት ለችግሮቹ መፍትሄ በማፈላለግ የሚመክር ጉባኤ ነው እንግዲህ በየጊዜው ሲካሄድ የቆየው። ዘንድሮም በዋናነት በአህጉሪቱ ላይ ጠንካራ የሆነ የአመጋገብ ስርዓትን መገንባት እንዲሁም ደግሞ የምግብ ዋስትናን ማረጋገጥ በሚለው አጀንዳ ላይ ዋና ትኩረቱን አድርጎ የሚመክር ይሆናል። ያም ሆኖ ግን የተለያዩ ጉዳዮች የሚነሱበት ጉባኤ ነው የሚሆነው። ዛሬና ነገ በዚህ በአዲስ አበባ ጉባኤው የሚካሄድ ይሆናል። የተለያዩ የአፍሪካ ሀገራት መሪዎች እንዲሁም ደግሞ ከተለያዩ ሀገራትም ሀገራቸውን ወክለው የመጡ የተለያዩ ባለስልጣናት በዚህ ጉባኤ ላይ የሚሳተፉ ነው የሚሆነው። ከዚህ ከአዲስ አበባ ማለት ነው በቀጥታ መታሰቢያ ደረጃ ከሌሎች ባልደረቦቼ ጋር ከደምስ መኩሪያው፣ አስማማዋየ ነው፣ ሰለሞን አበጋዝና ቶማስ ኃይሉ ጋር መረጃዎችን እያጋራናችሁ ቆይታ የምናደርግ ነው የሚሆነው። አብራችሁን ቆዩ። 35ኛው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ የተለያዩ አዳዲስ ነገሮችን ይዞ እንደመጣ ይታሰባል። በተለይ ደግሞ ከኮሮና ቫይረስ መከሰት ጋር ተያይዞ ጉባኤው ከ2 ዓመታት በኋላ ነው ገጽ ለገጽ እንደዚህ በአዲስ አበባ የሚካሄደውና እንደ አጠቃላይ ግን ምን የተለየ ነገር ይዞ ይመጣል?
ያው እንግዲህ መታሰቢያ የ35ኛው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ስብሰባ በኢትዮጵያ የአፍሪካ መሪዎች ስብሰባን በመመልከት በኩል አዲስ ነገር አይኖርም። ያው ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ በጣም በርካታ የአፍሪካ ሀገራት የመሪዎች ስብሰባን ኢትዮጵያ ስታካሄድ ቆይታለች ከምስረታው ጊዜ ጀምሮ እንደሚታወቀው። የዚህኛው በዚህ ስብሰባ ግን በጣም ብዙ ልዩ ገጽታዎች አሉት ብለን ማሰብ እንችላለን። በዋናነት በተለይ የህብረቱ መሪዎች የሚሰበሰቡበት መንገድ በዓለም አቀፍ ተጽዕኖ ምክንያት በነበረው የኮቪድ ምክንያት በብዙ መልኩ የተገታ ነበር። ባለፈው እንደምናስታውሰው በቪዲዮ ኮንፈረንስ ነው የሚገናኙት የአፍሪካ መሪዎች። በቪዲዮ ኮንፈረንስ ሀሳቦች መለዋወጥ በራሱ የሚወስደው ወይም የሚኖረው ተጽዕኖ አለ ብዙ ጊዜና ያ ተጽዕኖ የሚፈጥረውን ሀሳቦች በተቃረበ መልኩ ለመግለጽ የሚነበረውን እሳቤ የሚገታበት መንገድ ነበር። ይህ በአፍሪካ ብቻ ሳይሆን በአጠቃላይ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ችግር ሆኖ ቆይቷል። በዚህ ምክንያት የአፍሪካ መሪዎች የቪዲዮ ኮንፈረንሶች ሲያካሂዱ ለ2 ዓመታት ቆይተዋል። አሁን ለመጀመሪያ ጊዜ የገጽ ለገጽ ስብሰባ የሚያደርጉት ወይም በአካል ተገናኝተው አፍሪካ አህጉሪቱን የሚመለከቱ ጉዳዮች የሚመለከቱበት መሆኑ አንዱ ልዩ ገጽታው ነው ብዬ አስባለሁ። እንደ አፍሪካን በራሱ አፍሪካ ያለችበት ስሜት በራሱ የአፍሪካን ውክልና የሚመለከት ዓለም አቀፍ ስርዓቱ ላይ አፍሪካ ያላት ተደማጭነት፣ አፍሪካ ያላት ድምጽ፣ አፍሪካ ያላት ምስል መቀየር አለበት የሚለው ከኢትዮጵያ እስከ ደቡብ አፍሪካ በዛኛው ደግሞ እስከ ሰሜን አፍሪካ ጫፍ እስካሉ ሀገራት ጭምር በጋራ እየተስተጋባ ባለበት በአገስት ላይ በተለይ በተባበሩት መንግስታት ድርጅት የጸጥታው ምክር ቤት ውስጥ አፍሪካ የምትታክል አህጉር የራሷን ትልቅ አንድ ወንበር ያስፈልጋታል ቬቶ ፓወር ላይ የሚለው ጨምሮ የውጭ ሀገራት ተጽዕኖዎች ጭምር ሊቆሙ ይገባል የሚል ሀሳቦች በጋራ እየተሰሙ ባለበት ሂደት ውስጥ የሚካሄድ ስብሰባ መሆኑ በራሱ ልዩ ስሜት ይሰጣል ብዬ አስባለሁ።
እውነት ነው። ከዛ ባለፈ ደግሞ ኢትዮጵያ የነበረችበትን ሁኔታ እናስታውሳለን። ከዚህ ከህግ ማስከበር ዘመቻው ጋር ተያይዞ የኢትዮጵያን ገጽታ ሊያበላሹ የሚችሉ የተለያዩ ዘገባዎች በምዕራባውያን አንዳንድ መገናኛ ብዙሃኖችም ሲነገር የነበረበት ሁኔታ ነበር። ከዛ ባለፈ ይህ 35ኛው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ በዚህ በአዲስ አበባ እንዳይካሄድም ጭምር ጫናዎች ሲደረጉ ነበረ። ከዚህ አንጻርስ በተለይ ለኢትዮጵያ የሚኖረው አንድምታ ምን ይመስላል? ደምስ ሱዳን
የኢትዮጵያን ከማንሳታችን በፊት እንግዲህ የአፍሪካ አንድነት ድርጅት ነበር መጀመሪያ አፍሪካ ሕብረት ሲነሳ የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የሆነው እንደ አውሮፓውያን አቆጣጠር በ2002 ደርባን ደቡብ አፍሪካ ላይ ነው። አሁን የምንገኘው 2022 ላይ ነው። የአፍሪካ ሕብረት 20ኛ ዓመቱን እያከበረ ባለበት ወቅት ነው ያለነው ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ የአፍሪካ ሕብረት በ20ኛ ዓመቱን እያከበረ ባለበት ወቅት እየተካሄደ ያለ ጉባኤ አንዱ ልዩ ገጽታ ነው ብለን ማንሳት እንችላለን ማለት ነው። ከዚህ ባሻገርም እንግዲህ ባለፉት 20 ዓመታት ውስጥ አፍሪካ በተለይ ከሰላምና ከደህንነት አንጻር ካየነው 4 መፈንቅለ መንግስትን ባለፈው የፈረንጆቹ ዓመት አፍሪካ ያስተናገደችው ባለፈው ዓመት በጣም በርካታ መፈንቅለ መንግስት እየተከናወነ ባለበት ወቅት የሚደረግ ጉባኤ መሆኑ ሌላኛው ገጽታ ያደርገዋል ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ
በሰላም የጸጥታ ችግር ውስጥ ባለችበት ጊዜ ማለት ነው የበለጠ
የሰላምና የጸጥታ ጉዳይ ስለዚህ አንዱ ልዩ ገጽታ ነው ተብሎ ሊጠቀስ የሚችል ጉዳይ ነው ማለት እንችላለን። ከዚህ ካለንበት ሁኔታ ጋር በተያያዘ ማለት ነው።
ምናልባት ማለት በጥሩም በችግር ውስጥ የምናያቸው ገጽታዎች ያሉት ሁኔታ ነው ያለችው አፍሪካ በራሷ። ቅድም ያነሳውልሽ ጥሩ ነገሮች አሉ ምንላቸው፣ ነገር ግን በፈተኝ ሁኔታ ውስጥ አዳጉርም እያለፈች ነው። የኮቪድ ተጽዕኖ አለ። ቅድም ደምስ ያነሳው የሰላምና ጸጥታ አለ። ቅድም አብረሽ አነስተሽ የነበረውን ሀሳብ ስናነሳ ግን በኢትዮጵያ ምንድነው ለኢትዮጵያ ያለው ምልከታ ለሚለው ለኢትዮጵያ ሁለት አይነት አንድምታ ያለው ይመስለኛል። በአንድ በኩል ኢትዮጵያ ያለፈችበት ፈተኝ ጊዜያቶች ውስጥ ማለፉ ይታወቃል። ያ ደግሞ ፈተኝ ሁኔታዎች ውስጥ በአገር ውስጥ ካለው ችግር ባለፈ የውጭ ተጽዕኖ በከባድ ሁኔታ ውስጥ ነበር። ይህ የአፍሪካ ሕብረት ስብሰባ ለኢትዮጵያ ማካሄድ ቅድም እንደነገርኩሽ ብርቅ አይደለም። በመሰረታው ጀምሮ እስካሁን አካሄዳለች። ነገር ግን ይህ ስብሰባ አንድ የኢትዮጵያን ገጽታ ለማበላሸት እንደ መጠቀሚያ ለማድረግ በሚል ኢትዮጵያ በችግሩ ስላለች በጸጥታ ችግር ስላለበት የመካሄድ የለበትም የሚል ዘመቻ እንደነበር ይታወቃል። ያንን አሸንፋ የምታካሄደው ስብሰባ መሆኑ ከባለፉት ጊዜያቶች ይለየዋል በራሱ። በሌላ በኩል ያንን እንድታሸንፍ ያደረጓት እነማን ናቸው? አፍሪካውያን ወንድሞቿ ናቸው። የአፍሪካ ሀገራት ይህ ስብሰባ በኢትዮጵያ መካሄድ አለበት ብሎ ነው የወሰኑት። የአፍሪካ ሀገራት በኢትዮጵያ መካሄድ አለበት ብሎ ይህን ስብሰባ ሲወስኑ ደግሞ ሌላ የገለጹልን ነገር ኢትዮጵያ ለአፍሪካ አንድነትና ለአፍሪካ ብልጽግና በአራት መሪዎች አካባቢ 4 ወይ 5 መሪዎች በተመሳሳይ አቋም ውስጥ አልፋ ወይም 60 ከግማሽ ክፍለ ዘመን በላይ በአፍሪካ ጉዳይ ላይ ጽኑ አቋም ይዛ ለመጣች ኢትዮጵያ ውለታ እንደመመለስ ነው የአፍሪካ ወንድሞች ያደረጉት። ይህን ስብሰባ በኢትዮጵያ መካሄድ አለበት ብለው መወሰናቸው ኢትዮጵያ ለአፍሪካዊነትና ለአፍሪካ የሰጠችውን ሁኔታ ለዛ ጥሩ ምላሽ አፍሪካዊ ወንድሞቿ መስጠቷን ጭምር የሚያሳይ ምሳሌ ያለው ነው። ከዛ ባለፈ እዚያ ያሉ በርካታ የሚሳተፉት የሌሎች ሀገራትን ከፍተኛ ተቋማት መሪዎች ጨምሮ መሳተፋቸው በኢትዮጵያ ያለው ነባራዊ ሁኔታ ከሚነገረው የተለየ መሆኑን ለመረዳት ድል ይሰጣቸዋል።
እውነት ነው። ከአፍሪካውያን ባለፈ የተለያዩ ሀገራት ተወካዮችም ጭምር ናቸው በዚህ ጉባኤ ላይ ለመሳተፍ አዲስ አበባ እየገቡት። ዛሬም ማለዳ ላይ የተለያዩ መሪዎች እየገቡ ነበረ። ይህን ጉዳይ ከእናንተም ጋር መለስበታለሁኝ። ወደ ሌላኛው ባልደረባችን ነው የምናልፈው። ባልደረባዬ ሰለሞን አበጋዝ በቀጥታ መስመር ላይ ነው የሚገኘው። በተለይ ሰለሞን የሚሰማ ከሆነ 40ኛው የውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሮችና የስራ አስፈጻሚዎች ጉባኤ ከዋናዎቹ መሪዎች አስቀድሞ ረቡዕ ዕለት እንዲሁም ደግሞ ሐሙስ ዕለት ተከናውኗል። ከዛ ጎን ለጎን የተለያዩ መግለጫዎችም ሲሰጡ ነበረ። አጠቃላይ የነበረው ሂደት ምን ይመስል ነበር? ምን ጉዳዮች ላይ ነበረ ትኩረት የተደረገው?
የመሪዎች ጉባኤ በዚህ አዲስ አበባ የህብረቱ መቀመጫ እንግዲህ ይካሄዳል። በዋነኝነት ከዛ ቀደም ብሎ ደግሞ የ40ኛው የአፍሪካ ህብረት የስራ አስፈጻሚዎች ወይም ደግሞ የህብረቱ አባል ሀገራት የውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሮች ባለፈው ሮብና ሐሙስ ማለት ነው እዚህ አዲስ አበባ ላይ ጉባኤያቸውን አድርገዋል። በተለይ ደግሞ የአህጉሪቱን የስርዓተ ምግብ አቅም መገንባት፣ የሰው ሀብት ልማትና የኢኮኖሚና የማህበራዊ ልማትን ያፋጥናል በሚል መሪ ሀሳብ ነው እንግዲህ ዘንድሮ እነዚህ ሁለት ጉባኤዎች የሚካሄዱት። 40ኛው የአፍሪካ ህብረት የውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሮች ጉባኤ እንግዲህ በመሰረታዊነት የተለያዩ ጉዳዮችን አንስቷል። ለህብረቱ 35ኛ መሪዎች ጉባኤ ማለት ነው ረቂቅ አጀንዳዎች ላይ ነው በስፋት እንግዲህ ውይይት ያደረገው። ከነዛ መካከል በጥቂቱ ለማንሳት ያክል እንግዲህ የ2063 አጀንዳ ትልቁ እንግዲህ የአፍሪካ ትደርስበታለች ተብሎ እንደ ትልም የተቀመጠውን ጉዳይ ተነስቶ ነበረ። እሱ አፈጻጸም ደግሞ ያለበት ደረጃ እንግዲህ ፕሮግረስ ወይም ደግሞ እድገቶች እያሳዩ ነው። ነገር ግን አሁንም ቢሆን በጣም ብዙ መሰናክሎች ያሉበትና የህብረቱ አባል ሀገራት ደግሞ አንድነታቸውን የበለጠ አጠናክረው ስኬት እንዲመጣ መስራት አለባቸው የሚል ብዙ እቅዶችን ያዘ ስለሆነ 2063 እሱ ላይ ሰፊ ውይይት የተደረገበት ነበር። ሌላው ደግሞ በአጠቃላይ የሰላምና የጸጥታ ጉዳይ እንግዲህ የተነሳበት ነበር ማለት እንችላለን። አፍሪካ አሁንም ቢሆን ከሰላምና ከጸጥታ ችግር አልተላቀቀችም። ስለዚህ ሰላሟን ማምጣት አለባት። ሁለንተናዊ እድገቷን ማምጣት የምትችለው ሰላምና ደህንነት ሲረጋገጥ ነው የሚል ሀሳቦች በስፋት ተንሸራሽረው ነበር። በተለይ ደግሞ ህገ መንግስታዊ በሆነ መንገድ ወደ ስልጣን የመምጣት አባዜዎች በአፍሪካ በተደጋጋሚ ይስተዋላሉ። በተለይ ደግሞ በምዕራብ አፍሪካ ሀገራቶች ባለፈው በ21 እንደ ፈረንጆቹ አቆጣጠር ከዚያ ባለፈ ደግሞ በአሁንም ደግሞ እንደዚሁ ከሁለት ሳምንት በፊት በቡርኪና ፋሶ የተካሄደው መፈንቅለ መንግስት እናስታውሳለን። በማሊም እንዲሁም በቻድና በጊኒ ቢሳው መጨረሻም ላይ ደግሞ እንደዚሁ የመፈንቅለ መንግስት ሙከራዎች ነበሩና እነዚህ ደግሞ በምርጫ መምጣት ያለበት የመንግስት ስርዓት አፍሪካ ላይ መምጣት ያለበት ነገር ግን በመፈንቅለ መንግስት ወደ ስልጣን መምጣት አግባብነት የለውም። ይህ ደግሞ ለአህጉሪቱ ትልቁ ማነቆ የሆነባት ነው። ልማትን ለማፋጠን ኢኮኖሚን ለማምጣት ዲሞክራሲ ስርዓትን ለመገንባት ይህንን አካሄድ መከተል ተገቢ አይደለም፣ ሊወገዝ ይገባል የሚል ሀሳቦች በስፋት ተንሸራሽረውበታል። ሌላው ደግሞ በስርዓተ ምግብ ላይ የተነሳ ጉዳይ ነው። እንግዲህ አፍሪካ በርካታ ሪሶርስ አላት፣ የማዕድኖችም ጭምር አላት። የሚታረስ መሬቷን ቢሆን ደግሞ በጣም ከፍተኛ ነው። ይሁን እንጂ አሁንም ዜጎቿ በረሃብ አለንጋ እየተገረፉ እንደሆኑ እንደዚሁ በስፋት የተነሳበት ነበር 40ኛው የስራ አስፈጻሚዎች ጉባኤ ማለት ነው። በተለይ ደግሞ በአሁኑ ሰዓት 250 ሚሊዮንና ከዛ በላይ የሚሆኑ አፍሪካውያን የረሃብ ችግር ተጋርጦባቸዋል። የአፍሪካን ዘላቂ ልማት ለማረጋገጥ ብቻ በአንድ ዓመት ብቻ ማለት ነው የዓለም ምግብ ፕሮግራም እንዲሁም ደግሞ ሌሎች ያወጡት መረጃ እንደሚያሳየው እንዲሁም በውይይቱ በጉባኤው እንደተነሳው ወደ 425 ቢሊዮን የአሜሪካን ዶላር ጭምር ያስፈልጋል። እሱን ደግሞ ለማምጣት ሀገራት በተለይ በግብርናቸው ላይ ማዘመንና ሰፊ ስራዎችን መስራት አለብን የሚል ሀሳቦች አሉ። እንግዲህ የ35ኛው የአፍሪካ ህብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ ለ2 ዓመታት ያልተካሄደበት ትልቁ ምክንያት ደግሞ የኮሮና ወረርሽኝ ነው። እንግዲህ አፍሪካ ደግሞ ባለፉት 2 ዓመታት ኢኮኖሚዋም፣ ፖለቲካዋም፣ ማህበራዊ እንቅስቃሴዋም የበለጠ ነበር ችግሮች የወደቁባትና የኮሮና ቫይረስን የበለጠ ጉዳቱን ለመቀነስ ሰፊ ስራዎች አጠቃላይ መስራት አለበት። እንዲሁም ደግሞ የአፍሪካ አህጉሩ የበሽታ መከላከልና መቆጣጠር ድርጅት ሲዲሲም እሱም ሰፊ ስራ ሊሰራ ይገባል። አሁን ያለው ሁኔታ በማህበራዊና በኢኮኖሚ ላይ ትልቁን ማነቆ ይዞብናል የሚል ሀሳቦች ተነስተው ነበር። እንግዲህ የረቂቅ አጀንዳዎች ላይ ተወያይተው በዛሬው ዕለት ደግሞ 35ኛው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ ላይ እነዚህ ረቂቅ አጀንዳዎች ደግሞ የበለጠ ቀርበው ዳብረው በመሪዎች ደግሞ የሚጸድቁበትና በቀጣይ አፍሪካ በልማቷ ላይ ዘላቂ ልማቷን በማረጋገጥ ፖለቲካና ዲሞክራሲን ለማምጣት ምን ይደረጋል በሚል ጉዳይ ላይ የበለጠ ውሳኔዎች ይተላለፋሉ ተብሎ ነው የሚጠበቀው።
ወደ እናንተ እንመለስ። 35ኛው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ ከደቂቃዎች በኋላ ይጀምራል። ጉባኤው እንግዲህ በዋናነት የስርዓተ ምግብን በአህጉር ደረጃ ጠንካራ የሆነ ስርዓተ ምግብ መፍጠር እንዲሁም ደግሞ የምግብ ዋስትናን ማረጋገጥ ላይ ትኩረቱን አድርጎ ነው የሚካሄደው። በተለያዩ ጊዜያት ሕብረቱ ጉባኤውን ሲያካሄድ አፍሪካ ውስጥ ያሉ ችግሮችን መነሻ በማድረግ ነው ምክረ ሀሳብ የሚያቀርበው። መፍትሄ የሚሆኑ የመፍትሄ አቅጣጫዎችንም ጭምር ነው የሚያስቀምጠውና ዘንድሮስ የሚካሄደው የ35ኛው የመሪዎች ጉባኤ ምን አይነት ይዘት ይኖረዋል ተብሎ ይጠበቃል? እንደው እስካሁን ከነበረው ሂደት አንፃር።
መልካም እንግዲህ ቀደም ሲል እንዳነሳ ነው በዋናነት የዘንድሮ የአፍሪካ ሕብረት ጉባኤ መነሻ ተደርጎ የሚወሰደው የአህጉሪቱን ስርዓተ ምግብ እንዲሁም ማህበራዊና ኢኮኖሚያዊ ጉዳዮች ላይ ትኩረት ያደርጋል ነው የተባለው። ነገር ግን ከዛ ባልተናነሰ መልኩ የጸጥታ ጉዳይ አህጉሪቱ ላይ ከፍተኛ ትኩረት ያገኛል ተብሎ ይጠበቃል። የጸጥታ ጉዳይ ትኩረት እንዲያገኝ የሚያስችለው ዋነኛው ምክንያት እንግዲህ አንደኛ ከህብረቱ መነሻ ዓላማ ጋር በቀጥታ የተያያዘ ነው። የአፍሪካ ህብረት በሚቀጥለው 50 ዓመት ውስጥ አፍሪካን የተዋሃደች የበለጸገች እና ጠንካራ አህጉር እናደርጋለን የሚል ራዕይ ያስቀመጠ ነው። ጠንካራ ሲባል ሰላምና ደህንነት እዛ ውስጥ ያለ ጉዳይ መሆኑን ማየት እንችላለን። ባለንበት ወቅት በተደጋጋሚ ስንገልጸው እንደነበረው በርካታ ሀገራት አፍሪካ ሀገራት የሰላም ችግር ውስጥ ናቸው፣ የሰላም ችግር ውስጥ ናቸው፣ ፈተና ላይ ነው ያሉት። ስለዚህ ይሄን አንዱ ትኩረት ያገኛል ተብሎ የሚጠበቅ ጉዳይ ነው ማለት ነው። እንግዲህ በነገራችን ላይ ከአንድ ዓመት በፊት የነበረው የተኩስ ድምጽ የማይሰማባት አፍሪካ በመርህ ደረጃ ተይዞ ሲሰራበት የነበረ ነው። እንግዲህ ከአንድ ዓመት በፊት ተሰርቶበት ከአንድ ዓመት በኋላ ግን የአፍሪካ አህጉር የሰላም ሁኔታ በተለያዩ ሀገራት ሲታይ ችግር ውስጥ ያሉበትን ሁኔታ ማየት እንችላለን። ስለዚህ ቀጣይነት ያለው ስራ የሚጠይቅ ጉዳይ ነው ማለት ነው። በአንድ ዓመት የሆነ መርህ አድርገሽ ስለሰራሽበት ብቻ ወይ ስለተሰራበት ብቻ ለውጥ ያመጣል ተብሎ አይታሰብም። ህብረቱም በተለያየ ጊዜ ከሚያጋጥሙ ወቅታዊ ሁኔታዎች በመነሳት በመርህ ደረጃ የሚያስቀምጣቸው ጉዳዮች ቢኖሩም ትኩረቱን በተለያየ መልኩ ከሚያጋጥሙ ወቅታዊ ሁኔታዎች ጋር እየቃኘና እያስተካከለ ለዚያም አቅጣጫዎች እያስቀመጠ የሚሄድ ነው እስከዛሬ ባለው ልምድ ማለት ነው።
አቅጣጫዎችን ከማስቀመጥ ባለፈ ጠንካራ የሆነ ክትትል እንዲሁም ደግሞ ወደ ተግባር መግባት እንደሚያስፈልግ የሚያመላክቱ በርካታ አጋጣሚዎችን ነው እየተመለከትን የሚገኘው። አስማማ ወደ አንተ ልምጣ።
የደምስ ያነሳው የሰላም ለጸጥታ ጉዳይ ትኩረት እንደሚሆን ይታወቃል። አፍሪካ ጉዳይ የሰላም ለጸጥታ በሚመለከት ለየቅል ነው የሆነ ነው ጉዞ። በአንድ በኩል አፍሪካ ቅድም ደምስ እንዳነሳለች 2022 ላይ የጥይት ድምጽ የማይሰማባት አህጉር እፈጥራለሁ ትላለች። ነገር ግን በታሪኳ በአመቱ ውስጥ የማታውቀውን 4 መፈንቅለ መንግስት የምታስተናግድ አህጉር ናለች። ስለዚህ ለየቅል የሆነው መንገድ ምንድነው ችግሩ ብሎ መሪዎች የሚፈትሹበት ጊዜ ይመስለኛል አንዱ ትልቅ ትኩረት። ሌላው የኮቪድ ጉዳይ አንዱ የመወያያ ጉዳይ መሆን አይቀርም። ኮቪድ ዓለም አቀፋዊ የኢኮኖሚ ችግርን ፈጥሯል። በዛ ደግሞ ትልቅ ዋጋ እየከፈለች ያለችው አፍሪካ ነች። በጣም በርካታ በረሃብ ውስጥ ያሉ ዜጎች ያሉባት አህጉር ነች። በጣም በብዙ መልኩ ያላደገ በጣም ድጋፍ የሚፈልግ ማህበረሰብ ያለባት አህጉር ነች። ስለዚህ ዓለም አቀፍ ድጋፍ ሰጪዎች እንኳን የሚባሉት በኮቪድ ምክንያት በብዙ መልኩ እቀባ አለባቸውና ያንን ነገር ማስተካከል አንዱ ጉዳይ ይሆናል ተብሎ ይታሰባል። 2063 አጀንዳ በየአፍሪካ ህብረት ስብሰባዎች ውስጥ አሁን የሚመከርበት ነው። ባለፉት ጊዜያቶች በጣም ብዙ ፕሮግረሶች ውጤቶችን አይተናል። የአፍሪካ የነፃ የንግድ ቀጠናን ማንሳት እንችላለን። የፓስፖርትን ጉዳይ ማንሳት እንችላለን። የአቪዬሽን ጉዳይ ማንሳት እንችላለን። እነዚህ 2063 ፕሮጀክት ውስጥ ያሉ ናቸው። እነሱ መተግበር ችሏል። ግን በጣም ብዙ የሚቀር ጉዳይ አለ። ሀገራት ማስተሳሰርን ጨምሮ በጣም ብዙ ስራዎች። ስለዚህ የ50 ዓመቱን ሁኔታ ባለፉት 10 ዓመት ሊሞላው አካባቢ ስለሆነ አሁን 9 ዓመት አካባቢ ሆኖታል። ስለዚህ ምንድነው የሚለውን ጉዳይ ለመፈተሽ እድል የሚያገኙበት ይመስለኛል። ከዛ ባለፈ ክላይሜትን የሚመለከት ጉዳይ አለ። ከዛ ውጪ በመሪዎች በየራሳቸው የሚያቀርቡት ሪፖርትም አላቸው። በተለያየ የአፍሪካ በመሰረተ ልማት በወባን በሽታን በሌሎች መልኩ የሚመለከቱ ጉዳዮችም ሌላ የሚጠበቅ ነው። ተለምዳዊ የሆነው በየአመቱ ሊቀመንበር የመቀየር ሁኔታም ዘንድሮ ይኖራል። እሱ በዋናነት የዲሞክራቲክ ሪፐብሊክ ኮንጎ ወደ ሊቀመንበርነት ቦታ ወደ ሴኔጋል
ለማኪሳር እነዚህ ይጠበቃል።
እውነት ነው። እንግዲህ የአፍሪካ ህብረት በተለይ የ50 ዓመት እቅድን ነድፎ 2063 ላይ ተፈጻሚ ይሆናል ካለባቸው ጉዳዮች ውስጥ በተለይ አህጉሪቱን ለዜጎቿ ምቹ ለነዋሪዎቿ ምቹ እንድትሆን ማድረግን ያካተተ ነው። በዋናነት የስራ አጥን ቁጥር መቀነስ፣ ሰላምና ደህንነት የተረጋገጠባት አህጉር እንድትሆን የማድረግ እቅድም ነበር የተቀመጠበት። እቅዱ 2013 ላይ ነበረ ይፋ የተደረገው። 9 ዓመታትን ተጉዘናል። በእነዚህ 9 ዓመታት ውስጥ ምን ያህል ተፈጻሚ ሆነዋል፣ የትኞቹ ተሳክተዋል የሚለው ጉዳይ በራሱ ሊፈተሽ የሚገባው ጉዳይ ነው። ከእናንተ ጋር አሁን ቆይታዬን እቀጥላለሁኝ። ባልደረባዬ ቶማስ ኃይሉ በቀጥታ መስመር ላይ ነው የሚገኘው። ቶማስ እንደምን ውለሃል? እንግዲህ በተለያዩ አጋጣሚዎች የሚነሳው አህጉሪቱ ውስጥ አፍሪካ ውስጥ የሰላምና ደህንነት ጉዳይ አሁንም አሳሳቢ ነው የሚሉ ነገሮች ይነሳሉ። ህብረቱ በዚህ ጉዳይ ላይ በየዓመቱ ጉባኤውን ባካሄደ ቁጥር የተለያዩ ምክክሮችን ያደርጋል፣ አቅጣጫዎችን ያስቀምጣል። ከዚህ ጋር የተያያዘ መረጃህን መቀጠል ትችላለህ?
አመሰግናለሁ። እንግዲህ በዛሬው ዕለት ከደቂቃዎች በኋላ ይጀምራል ተብሎ የሚታሰበው 35ኛው የአፍሪካ መሪዎች ስብሰባ በዋናነት እንግዲህ ከዋና አጀንዳው በተጨማሪ ትኩረት ሰጥቶ ይወያይበታል ተብሎ ከሚጠበቁ ጉዳዮች መካከል የሰላምና የደህንነት ጉዳዮች ትኩረት ይሰጣቸዋል ተብሎ ይታሰባል። እንግዲህ ከሰላምና ደህንነት ችግር ጋር በተያያዘ በአፍሪካ ውስጥ አሁን የሚስተዋሉ በተለይ የመፈንቅለ መንግስት ችግሮች እንዳሉ ይታወቃል። በተለይ ከ1950 ጀምሮ እስካሁን ድረስ ያሉትን ብንቆጥር እንኳን ወደ 200 የአካባቢ የመፈንቅለ መንግስት ግልበጣዎች መደረጋቸው መረጃዎች ያመለክታሉ። በቅርቡ እንኳን ጊኒ፣ ቡርኪና ፋሶ እንዲሁም ማላዊ የዚሁ የመፈንቅለ መንግስት ችግር ወይም ደግሞ ከመፈንቅለ መንግስት ጋር ተያይዞ የሚመጣ ጦስ ሰለባ የሆኑ ሀገራት መሆናቸው የሚታወስ ነው። ታዲያ ይህንን የአጀንዳ 2063ን ከማሳካት አኳያ እነዚህ የመፈንቅለ መንግስት አደጋዎች ሌላኛው የፈጠሩት ችግር ነው። ሌላኛው ደግሞ ከዚህ ጋር በተያያዘ የሽብርተኝነትም ራሱን የቻለ አደጋ መሆኑ ይታወቃል። ነገር ግን እነዚህ አጀንዳዎች በተለይ 2063 ላይ ሀገሪቱ የበለጸገች እንዲሁም ደግሞ በኢኮኖሚ እንዲሁም ደግሞ ትስስሯ የሰፋ አፍሪካን ከማፍጠር አኳያ ይጠበቅበታል ተብሎ የተቀመጠውን ግብ እንዳያሳካም የራሱን መሰናክል እንደሚሆን ይጠበቃል ማለት ነው እና ይህንን ተከትሎ ታዲያ ይህ ህብረቱ ይህን በትኩረት ገምግሞ እንዲሁም ደግሞ ተወያይቶበት አቅጣጫዎችን ያስቀምጥበታል ተብሎ ይታሰባል። እንግዲህ ቀደም ሲል ለሁለት ቀናት ሲካሄድ የነበረው 40ኛው በሚኒስትሮች ደረጃ የሚደረገው በውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሮች ደረጃ የሚደረገው ስብሰባ ወይም ደግሞ ጉባኤ መጠናቀቁ ይታወቃል። በዛ ጉባኤ ላይም አጀንዳዎች በእርግጥ ሲቀርቡ ነበር። ነገር ግን የውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሮችም ይህንኑ የሰላምና ጸጥታ ጉዳዮች ጋር በተያያዘ አህጉሪቱን ምን ያህል ጎድቷታል የሚለውን በተመለከተ መግለጫ መሰጠቱ የሚታወስ ነው። ይህን ተከትሎ ታዲያ በአህጉሪቱ አሁንም ለእድገቷ ሳንካ እየሆነ ያለው ከዚህ ከሰላምና ደህንነት እንዲሁም ደግሞ ከችግሮች ጋር በተያያዘ ያሉ አደጋዎች አሁንም አሳሳቢነታቸው ቀጥሏል ማለት ነው። እንግዲህ እንደሚታወቀው አጀንዳ 2063 አሁን በ2013 ነበር የህብረቱን 50ኛ ዓመት መከበር ጋር ተያይዞ የተቀረጸው። ነገር ግን ላለፉት 9 ዓመታት ይህንኑ ጉዳይ በተለያየ መልኩ ሲነሳ ነበር። እንደሚታወቀው ከዚህ ቀደም የነበረው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት ጉባኤ በተለይ ሳይለንሲንግ ዘጋን ወይንም የጥይት ድምጽ የማይሰማባት አፍሪካን ከመፍጠር አኳያ በራሱን የቻለ እንደ መርህ ቃል ወይንም ደግሞ እንደ አበይት አጀንዳ አድርጎ መወያየቱ የሚታወስ ነው። አሁንም ላለፉት 9 ዓመታት አፍሪካ በምን ለውጥ ላይ ነች የሚለው ነገር ሲገመገም ምን ያህል ያን ያህል ለውጥ ያልተመጣበት ወይንም ደግሞ ለውጥ ያልታየበት ነው ማለት ይቻላል። እንዲሁም በዚህ ከተለይ በዚህ ከ2021 በፈረንጆቹ ወይንም በእኛ ደግሞ በዚሁ በያዝነው ዓመት ውስጥ የተደረጉ የመፈንቅለ መንግስት ግልበጣዎች እንዲሁም ደግሞ ከዛ ጋር በተያያዘም የሞቱ ህዝቦች እንዲሁም ደግሞ የዜጎች ደህንነት ለችግር የተጋለጠበት ሁኔታ ማንሳት እንችላለን። ታዲያ ይህ 2063 አጀንዳ 2063 በምን መልኩ ውጤት ያመጣል ወይም ደግሞ ግቦቹን ያሳካል ተብሎ ጥያቄ ውስጥ እየገባ ያለ ጉዳይ ስለሆነ ይህም የ35ኛው የአፍሪካ ሕብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ በትኩረት የሚወያይበት ይሆናል ተብሎ ይታሰባል። ከዚህ ከአፍሪካ ሕብረትም እንግዲህ ከጥቂት ደቂቃዎች በኋላ የሕብረቱ የመሪዎች ጉባኤ ይጀመራል። ሌሎች መረጃዎችን ደግሞ ወደ ተመልካቾቻችን የምናደርስ ይሆናል።
ቶማስን እናመሰግናለን። መልካም ቀን ይሁንልህ። 35ኛው የህብረቱ መሪዎች ጉባኤ እንግዲህ ከደቂቃዎች በኋላ የሚጀምር ነው የሚሆነው። ዛሬ የመጀመሪያው ቀን ነው፣ ነገ ይጠናቀቃል ተብሎ ነው የሚጠበቀው። የተለያዩ ጉዳዮችን እያነሳን ነበር። እንደ አጠቃላይ ግን የእናንተንም የግል ምልከታ እናንሳና ምን ትጠብቃላችሁ? ምን አይነት አቅጣጫዎች ይቀመጣሉ ተብሎ ይታሰባል?
የህብረቱ ስብሰባ ቅድም እንዳነሳነው ነው ማለት በሁለቱ ብናይ የምንጠብቀውን ነገር እንደ አፍሪካ ህብረት አሁን የመሪዎች ስብሰባ በስብሰባ ባለፈ ውጤት ማምጣት ወደሚያስችል ውሳኔዎች መተግበር ያለበት ይመስለኛል። በብዙ መልኩ ቅድም እንዳነሳ ነው አንዱ የሰላምና ጸጥታ ጉዳይ ነው። በመሪዎች ደረጃ ሲነጋገሩ የሚደረገው ኮሚቴ የሚያደርገው ሁኔታዎች ቀጥታ ወደ ማስተካከያ አገሪቱን ወደ ሰላም ማምጣት የሚያስችል ሁኔታዎች ላይ መስራት እንዳለበት አቅጣጫ ማስቀመጥ ወደሚችልበት ደረጃ ያልፋል ብዬ አስባለሁ። ሁለተኛ የአፍሪካን ተደማጭነት ለማሳደግ አሁን ጅምር ጥረቶች አሉ። በተለይ የተባበሩት መንግስታት ድርጅት ላይ አፍሪካ በተለያየ መልኩ አለመወከሏ ዋጋ እያስከፈላት ነው። ከዋጋ ከከፈልን መካከል አንዱኛ ነን አይተነዋል እሱ። ስለዚህ አፍሪካ ውክልና ማደግ አለባት። ኢትዮጵያን ጨምሮ በርካታ የሀገራት መሪዎች እያቀነቀኑት ይገኛሉ። በእርግጥ ይሄ አዲስ አይደለም። በተባበሩት መንግስታት የጸጥታው ምክር ቤት መወከል አለባት የሚለው የቀድሞ የዚምባብዌ ፕሬዚዳንት ሙጋቤን ጨምሮ በርካቶች በመድረክ ሲያወሩት እንደነበር ይታወቃል። አሁን በተጠናከረ መልኩ መጥቷል። እሱን ውጤት ወደሚያመጣ ደረጃ ማድረስ አለብን። አለበለዚያ አፍሪካ እንደ አፍሪካ ውጤታማ ወደሆነ ውሳኔ ሰጭነት ካልመጣች ድረስ የሌሎች ሀገራት ጫናዎች እንደ አህጉርም እንደ ሀገራትም ከባድ ነው የሚሆነው። እሱ በዚህ ውሳኔ ውስጥ ይጠበቃል ተብሎ ይታሰባል። ከዛ ባለፈ ሌሎች የተጀመሩ የአፍሪካ ስራዎች የሚቀጥሉባቸው መንገዶች፣ የመሰረተ ልማት ትስስሮችና ሌሎች ነገሮችም የቀጣይ ስራዎች ትኩረት ይሰጣቸዋል ተብሎ ይታሰባል። እኔ የምጠበቀው አንድ እሱ ነው። በኢትዮጵያ በኩል ግን በብዙ መልኩ የምታተርፍበት ነው። ቅድም እንዳነሳ ነው እዚህ ያለው ሉካም ቡድን ስለ ኢትዮጵያ መረዳቱ ብቻ ሳይሆን ሲመለስ የሚሰጠው ምላሽ በጣም ትልቅ አስተዋጽኦ ይኖረዋል። ስለዚህ ለኢትዮጵያ ትልቅ ገጽታ ይኖረዋል። ከዛ ባለፈ የተባበሩት መንግስታት ድርጅት ምክትል ዋና ጸሐፊዋን ጨምሮ በርካታ የተቋማት መሪዎች መጥተዋል። የአፍሪካ ሀገራት መሪዎች ጨምሮ ዴሊጌሽን መጥቷል። ይህንን በኢትዮጵያ በተለመደው የእንግዳ ተቀባይነት ስታስተናግድ ስለ ኢትዮጵያ የሚባሉ ነገሮች ከዚህ በላይ ብዙ ነገር የማያስፈልጋቸው ይሆናሉ ብዬ አስባለሁና በኢትዮጵያ በኩልም ጥሩ ውጤት የሚጠበቅበት ነው።
ዋናው ነገር እንግዲህ የአፍሪካ ህብረት ስብሰባ አንድ አሁን እየተለመደ የመጣ ነገር አለ። ለአፍሪካዊ ችግር አፍሪካዊ መፍትሄ ያስፈልጋል። አፍሪካን ሶሉሽን ቱ አን አፍሪካን ፕሮብለም የሚባለው ማለት ነው። አፍሪካ በርካታ ችግሮች አሉባት። የኢኮኖሚ ችግር አለባት፣ የፖለቲካ ችግር አለባት፣ የማህበራዊ ጉዳዮች ችግር አለባት፣ የጸጥታ ችግር አለባት። እነዚህ ችግሮች አፍሪካዊ ችግሮች አፍሪካዊ መፍትሄ ይፈልጋሉ። የአፍሪካ ህብረት መሪዎች እዚህ ሲሰበሰቡ እንግዲህ አፍሪካዊ ቀለም ያለው መፍትሄ ለአህጉሪቱ መፍትሄ የሚሆን ይዘው ይመጣሉ የሚል ነው። በዚህ መፍትሄ ውስጥ በርካታ ሀገራት ተጠቃሚ ይሆናሉ። አንዷ ኢትዮጵያ ትሆናለች ብዬ ተስፋ አድርጋለሁ። እንደሚታወቀው ኢትዮጵያ በቀውስ ውስጥ የቆየች ሀገር ናት። አሁንም ሙሉ በሙሉ ከዛ ወጣለች ማለት አይቻልም። ስለዚህ ኢትዮጵያ ያለችበትን ነባራዊ ሁኔታ ለአህጉሪቱ መሪዎች በማስረዳት እነዚሁ መሪዎች የመፍትሄው አካል እንዲሆኑ ማድረግ ትችላለች የሚለው አንዱ መሰረታዊ ጉዳይ ነው ማለት እንችላለን። እንግዲህ ከመርሁም አንጻር የዘንድሮ እየተከበረ ያለው ዋናው ከስነ ምግብ ጋር የተያያዘ ነው። አፍሪካ ውስጥ ወደ 400 ሚሊዮን ገደማ የሚሆኑ ሰዎች ምግብ ማግኘት አልቻሉም።
1.3 ቢሊዮን ማለት ነው።
1.3 ቢሊዮን አህጉሪቱ ካላት ህዝብ ማለት ነው። በቂ የሆነ የምግብ አቅርቦት ወደ 400 ሚሊዮን ገደማ ሰዎች አላገኙም ማለት ትልቅ ቁጥር ነው። ስለዚህ ስለ አልሚ ምግብ ከማውራታችን ስለ ተመጣጠነ ምግብ ከማውራታችን በፊት ስለ ምግብ አቅርቦት ማውራት አለብን ማለት ነው። አፍሪካ የምግብ አቅርቦቷን ትመልስ ከሆነ መሬት አላት፣ ውሃ አላት፣ በጣም ወጣት የሆነ ብዙ ማህበረሰብ አላት። ይህንን ማቀናጀት ይጠበቅባታል ማለት ነው። አገራት ይህን እንዴት ያቀናጃሉ? መሪዎች በጋራ አቅጣጫዎችን ያስቀምጣሉ። አፍሪካ ህብረት እንግዲህ የተለያዩ መርሆችን ያስቀምጣል። በርካቶች የሚተቹት መርሁን ተከትሎ ያን በየሀገራቱ የማስፈጸምና ጠንካራ የሆነ ክትትል አድርጎ ውጤት ላይ የማድረስ ችግሮች ግን ይስተዋሉበታል የሚል ነው። በተለይ ከሰላምና ከጸጥታ አኳያ ይህ ትችት በጣም ህብረቱ ላይ ይነሳል። እንግዲህ ባለፈው ዓመት ለምሳሌ ስለ ቅርስ ባህልና ከዛ ጋር የተያያዙ ጉዳዮችን በመርህነት አስቀምጦ ነበረ። ባለፈው አንድ ዓመት በአፍሪካ በዚህ ደረጃ ምንድነው የመጣው ውጤት ብለን ካየን ጉልህ የሆነ ውጤት መጥቷል ብሎ ማለት አይቻልም። ዘንድሮም ስነ ምግብን እንደ መርህ ይዞ መጥቷል። እንግዲህ ቀደም ሲል ከዛ በፊት የተኩስ ድምጽ የማይሰማባት አፍሪካን በመርህ ደረጃ አስቀምጦ ነበር ለአንድ ዓመት። እሱም ቢሆን እዚህ ግባ የሚባል ውጤት አምጥቷል ማለት አይቻልም። ስለዚህ መሪዎች ተገናኝተው በመርህ ደረጃ የሚያስቀምጡትን ጉዳይ ወደ ተግባር በመቀየር ረገድ ብዙ ስራ ይጠበቅባቸዋል የሚለው አይ ቲንክ ገዢ ይመስለኛል።
እውነት ነው። የአመጋገብ ስርዓትን ስናነሳ አፍሪካ በተፈጥሮ ሀብት ጥሩ የምትባል አህጉር ናት። ያም ሆኖ ግን አጠቃቀም ላይ ችግር እንዳለ ይነሳል። ከዛ ጋር ተያይዞ የምግብ ዋስትናቸው ያልተረጋገጠ በርካታ በሚሊዮን የሚቆጠሩ ዜጎችም ያሉባት ናትና ህብረቱ እንግዲህ ምናልባት ዛሬ የሚያደርገው ጉባኤ እዚህ ላይ አቅጣጫ አስቀምጦ ወደ መፍትሄ የሚያሻገር ይሆናል ተብሎ ይታመናል። ከዛ ባለፈ ደግሞ የአፍሪካውያንን አንድነትና ትስስር በመፍጠር ረገድ ይሄ ጉባኤ ትልቅ ሚና ሊኖረው እንደሚችል ይታሰባል። በተለይ ከኢትዮጵያ ወቅታዊ ሁኔታ ሁኔታ ጋር ተያይዞ የተፈጠረ ወይም ደግሞ እየተካሄደ ያለ ጉባኤ እንደመሆኑ መጠን #ኖሞር ወይም ደግሞ የበቃ ዘመቻን ማንሳት እንችላለን። የኢትዮጵያን ብቻ ሳይሆን በርካታ አፍሪካውያንን ያጣመረ ሂደት እንደነበር እናስታውሳለንና የህብረቱ ጉባኤ ያንን ተከትሎ መካሄዱ አሁንም በአፍሪካ ሀገራት መካከል ያለውን ትስስር ለማጠናከር እንደሚጠቅምም ይታመናል። እንግዲህ 35ኛው የአፍሪካ ህብረት የመሪዎች ጉባኤ ከደቂቃዎች በኋላ ይጀምራል። በአሁኑ ሰዓት የበርካታ የአፍሪካ ሀገራት መሪዎች ወደዚህ አዳራሽ እየገቡ ነው የሚገኘው የኢትዮጵያ ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር አብይ አህመድን ጨምሮ ማለት ነው። ጉባኤው ከደቂቃዎች በኋላ ይጀምራል። የኢትዮጵያ ቴሌቪዥን ከዚሁ በቀጥታ ያለውን ሂደት በያላችሁበት የሚያደርስ ነው የሚሆነው። ተመልካቾቻችን አብራችሁን ቆዩ።
Palms of the dance to the rhythm of the reed as a new day dawns again. It's the sound of a distant drum and a mystery that I can't touch. It's the sound of the smile that the people share that makes me happy there. Sing it, sing it, sing it, sing it, sing it, sing it, our beloved Africa. Oh, Africa.
And now, South African singing sensation, PJ Powers.
Well, I've been all around the world. I have never found the one I found in Africa. Yes, I've been all around the world. I have never found the one I found in Africa. Oh, 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 welcome, welcome to the warmth of Africa. Welcome, everyone.
Please put your hands together for Ras Kimono from Nigeria.
Yeah, this is the music in the heart of every man. Is the innocent one in the midnight sky and the eagle that flies high. See the picture of this land with his colors.
Gentlemen, today we have discussed on the part of this African Union Commission, the 35th African Union Commission Head of States meeting launched in Addis Ababa. After the law enforcement operation in the northern part of Ethiopia, some foreign countries have been pressurizing Ethiopia not to host this continental meeting in the metropolis. As part of this move, the federal government is undertaking a lot of successful diplomatic activities to return back this continental meeting in Addis Ababa. There are a lot of pressures. That is not easy pressures from those giant foreign countries like America and other European countries.
Pour que les présidents Paul Kagame et Cyril Ramaphosa puissent nous suivre et pouvoir intervenir, eux qui sont nos deux champions, en faisant leur rapport en virtuel. Voilà, à présent je passe la parole au protocole pour nous guider dans notre réunion. Merci.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may we kindly stand for the AU anthem. Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. Felix Shisekedi Chilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellency, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency, Madam Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, United Nations. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellencies, Dr. Monique Sazavakanwa, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency, Madam Vera Songwe, United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Your Excellency, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Niger and Chief Executive Officer of African Union Development Agency. Your Excellency, Mr. Wamkelemene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Your Excellency, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank. Your Excellencies, Commissioners of the African Union Commission, the heads of the different African Union organs and regional economic communities, Excellencies, Ambassadors, media houses here present, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this opening ceremony of the 35th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the Union. The program for today stands as follows. We will have a statement by His Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, followed by a statement by His Excellency, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Then His Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, who addressed the Assembly virtually. The video statement will be followed by a statement by His Excellency, Mr. Felix Antonio Shisekedi Chilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We will then have an announcement of the Bureau of the Assembly of the African Union for 2022, followed by a handover statement by the outgoing chairperson of the African Union, Mr. Felix Shisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Last but not the least, we'll have an acceptance statement by the incoming chairperson of the African Union. Without much further ado, I wish to humbly request His Excellency, Mr. Moussa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union, to deliver his statement. Your Excellency, sir.
Excellence, Monsieur Antoine Félix Tshisekedi Tshilombo, Président de la République démocratique du Congo, Président en exercice de l'Union africaine. Excellences, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs des délégations, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Madame la vice-présidente de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs exécutifs des communautés économiques régionales, Mesdames et Messieurs les commissaires, distingués invités, Mesdames, Messieurs, nous voilà, enfin, physiquement réunis ici, au siège de notre organisation à Addis Ababa, cette ville hospitalière, foisonnante de culture, d'art et d'attraits patrimoniaux historiques et évocateurs d'une beauté jamais ternie par le temps. Excellence, Monsieur le Président Antoine Félix Tshisekedi, au moment où vous allez passer le témoin, permettez-moi de vous exprimer mes vifs remerciements et de vous adresser mes chaleureux compliments pour l'immense travail abattu à la tête de notre organisation continentale tout au long de l'année écoulée. Je salue l'excellente expérience de travail convivial, fructueux et intense que nous avions eue avec vous et sous votre leadership. Excellence, Monsieur Macky Sall, Président de la République du Sénégal, et président en exercice entrant de notre Union, je vous souhaite la bienvenue et formule des vœux de plein succès pour votre mandat. Votre pragmatisme, votre sens de la méthode, votre détermination et vos ambitions pour l'Afrique soulèvent de réels espoirs que l'entreprise lancée par vos prédécesseurs connaîtra une impulsion nouvelle en dépit des circonstances économiques et sanitaires difficiles. Plein succès à votre présidence. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la pandémie de la Covid-19 a interpellé le genre humain au plus profond de son être et de sa conscience. Nous ne pouvons, au moment où nous nous retrouvons physiquement pour la première fois depuis la survenance de la pandémie, échapper à notre part du questionnement sur nous-mêmes, nos doutes, nos angoisses, nos inquiétudes pour notre organisation et pour notre Afrique. Aux deux fléaux majeurs de l'heure, que sont la Covid-19 et le terrorisme à l'échelle du continent, s'ajoutent nos intrinsèques fragilités que les deux fléaux mettent à nu. Sur la Covid-19, le champion en la matière, le président Cyril Ramaphosa, vous présentera l'essentiel de nos efforts ces 2 dernières années, ainsi que les lignes directrices de notre stratégie de résistance et de triomphe futur contre la dévastatrice pandémie. 2 acteurs majeurs seront appelés à jouer un rôle prépondérant dans cette stratégie. Africa CDC, dont l'opérationnalisation est en cours. Il va occuper dans notre paysage institutionnel le statut d'une agence spécialisée, dotée de l'autonomie d'action qui dicte la nature de sa mission, tout en restant solidement ancrée au sein de l'organisation continentale. L'Agence africaine des médicaments, AMA, se prépare à jouer sa partition dans ce combat de promotion de la santé publique, d'existence et de bien-être des Africains. L'acquisition des vaccins et leur fabrication en Afrique paraissent être les points d'orgue de cette stratégie. L'impact de la Covid-19 s'est traduit par la contraction de la croissance de 2,1% en 2020 et par l'accentuation du taux d'endettement de 10 points du PIB. L'Afrique, en raison de l'insuffisance des financements externes pour compenser le faible taux de son épargne, ne pourra pas retrouver la dynamique de sa croissance d'avant la survenance de la Covid-19. Active dans la mobilisation des ressources financières en faveur du continent, tant par la réduction voire l'annulation de la dette que par la mobilisation des droits de tirage spéciaux, notre stratégie s'attachera à l'identification, voire l'invention d'autres sources innovantes de financement et de réduction des effets néfastes de la pandémie sur nos économies aux fragilités structurelles bien connues. Notre grand défi est et demeure, en ces domaines, l'acquisition de l'autonomie dans le financement de notre propre développement, par une lutte énergique contre les flux illicites des capitaux, par la réforme de nos politiques fiscales et par l'accélération de la mise en œuvre des institutions financières africaines. Sur l'expansion du terrorisme, nul n'ignore désormais que ce fléau prend à l'échelle du continent une ampleur inégalée. Jadis localisé dans deux zones réduites, le nord du Sahel et la Corne de l'Afrique, il étend désormais ses tentacules au sud du Sahel, au centre, voire aux contrées septentrionales du continent. La situation sécuritaire du continent aujourd'hui est profondément marquée par la métatase du terrorisme et de la dangereuse résurgence des changements anticonstitutionnels. D'ailleurs, les deux phénomènes établissent des liens de causalité connus de tous. L'un trouve souvent ses prétextes dans la prégnance et l'expansion de l'autre, et la nécessaire lutte contre celui-ci produit l'illusion que le second est la réponse aux échecs avérés dans la lutte contre le premier. La situation sécuritaire du continent appelle désormais une vraie nouvelle approche qui devrait questionner notre architecture de paix et de sécurité et sa corrélation avec le nouveau facteur de déstabilisation de l'Afrique. En l'absence de ces sursauts d'intelligence et de décision, je me pose de sérieuses questions sur l'avenir de notre projet phare de faire taire les armes à échéance fixée. La dangereuse expansion du mal requiert une mobilisation internationale plus forte et une solidarité interafricaine plus féconde, plus concrète, plus agissante. Il est particulièrement déconcertant de voir ici ou là des velléités d'engagement non africains pour soutenir les pays africains agressés, alors que le rayon tenu de la solidarité africaine ne permet de voir que l'immensité de la paralysie africaine vis-à-vis des demeures voisines qui s'embrasent. Le contexte marqué par ces deux fléaux aurait permis d'entrevoir les lueurs d'espoir si le monde n'était pas celui où les égoïsmes nationaux, le repli sur soi et l'affaissement des valeurs de solidarité et de générosité, fruits de notre commune humanité, s'éternissent à vue d'œil. La profonde et irrécusable vérité, pourtant, est qu'aucun pan de la société internationale ne saurait être rassuré sur son sort alors que tous les autres pans ne le seraient point. La crise du multilatéralisme est là, réelle et prégnante. À l'évidence, les tentatives d'approche de l'Afrique sont multiples et cela dénote sans doute un intérêt accru pour le continent. Mais cet intérêt ne s'est pas encore franchement traduit par une considération développementaliste substantielle en faveur de l'Afrique. L'idée, un temps miroité d'un plan Marshall en faveur du continent, s'est peu à peu envolée. Je ne suis pas loin de penser intensément qu'un tel plan pourtant nécessaire ne viendra jamais de l'extérieur. Ici, plus que jamais, le leadership africain est interpellé avec force pour un sursaut de mobilisation des ressources endogènes qui révèle l'immense potentiel du continent. Il n'y a point de salut que dans cette direction africaine pour l'Afrique. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, Le contexte passablement dépeint à grands traits est pourtant le cadre dans lequel nous avons, avec le soutien de la plupart parmi vous, pu nous déployer en faisant au mieux que nous avons pu usage des atouts dont nous disposons. Le déploiement dans un tel contexte nous a permis de mettre le doigt sur des zones de douleur que j'ai jugé utile de vous exposer sans détour, sans phare. Ce faisant, je fais confiance à votre sagesse, à votre sagacité et à vos immenses expériences pour m'écouter là-dessus et prendre les décisions idoines, celles que tous les acteurs du continent, les peuples particulièrement, espèrent que vous prendriez. Au premier plan des contraintes vécues, se situent les limites juridiques et politiques. Nous avons certes lancé la réforme institutionnelle de notre organisation. Elle a permis des progrès significatifs sur la voie de l'amélioration de notre gestion et efficacité interne. C'est le lieu de rendre un hommage mérité au président Paul Kagame qui en a été le champion et l'architecte en même temps, qu'aux hommes et femmes dont le chef de l'unité de réforme qui l'ont épaulé dans cette entreprise. En dépit de ces progrès incontestables,
despite of the undeniable progress, the reform remains silent on the situation of notorious legal fragility of the Commission and its chairperson. Their powers and competences remain the same as before the reform. How do such powers and competences reduce the leadership role of the Commission? Two major questions constrain the Commission to a rather modest role in the African decision-making process. The first is the narrow reading of the concept of subsidiarity. We certainly need to clarify better the relationship of subsidiarity and complementarity between the regional economic communities and the continental organization. Beyond, however, to declare here and there that the decision of an organ of the AU, in this case the Peace and Security Council on Mali, should be dependent on the decisions of a regional organization, namely ECOWAS. There is really a big gap. It is important that our summit brings here the necessary clarification to avoid any detrimental drift to the functioning of our political and security architecture. The second problem to consider is the question of the sovereignty of states. This is a protective shield against all sorts of abuses occurring in a member country. A restrictive, even dogmatic reading of the intangible principle of the sovereignty of the member states raises an iron wall against any intervention by the Continental Organization, either as a preventive measure through early warning or as a remedy when the crisis has broken out. We should not therefore be surprised under these conditions to see the Commission being treated here and there as a simple secretariat of the states. Sovereignty is not unique to our organization, and I know it. All international and regional organizations are facing this. But its force and the restrictive readings to which it is subjected at the AU remain excessive and are detrimental to the full capacity of the organization for initiative and action. This double handicap was not unrelated to the conduct of the Commission to the face of unconstitutional changes of government, a disastrous wave of which has been sweeping in recent times and not only in West Africa. It was, however, clear that such situation was almost inevitable if a certain number of measures and political initiatives were not taken with the desired speed. Solidarity and state sovereignty made any proactive action by the Commission impossible. This situation can only result in a gradual slumber of the role of the leader of the organization at the political and diplomatic levels. On this 20th anniversary of the African Union, a day of renaissance, remembrance, assessment, meditation, and projection into the future, I'll call for more inventiveness and the creative spirit to give back to the operational organ of our union greater possibility of action and influence on the political future of our states, in particular when these are in real need for attention. In this effort to awaken the organization, through an inventive reflection of the best modes and models, how can we not question our democratic systems and our peace and security architecture? Have these been able to promote operations ensuring the minimum of good governance? The fight against corruption, nepotism, mismanagement, exclusion. Have they made it possible to fulfill our dream of an Africa where we have silenced the guns? Are we determined enough to reform our Peace and Security Council? Have we mobilized enough efforts for the reform of the United Nations Security Council by opening, when the time comes, a credible corridor for Africa to enter this body in charge of peace in the world? In a word, have our models made it possible to meet the expectations of hundreds of millions of young people and African women burned by the unbearable turpitudes of the political classes with efficiency and ethical values in continual collapse? In other words, have they made it possible to raise the dikes necessary for the easy populism which prepares the ground for coup d'etat and rebellions? There is certainly a vast number of issues, the perceptive, courageous and innovative consideration of which can no longer be deferred. In the constellation of political constraints, how not to deplore the shortcomings in the application of the dual principle of speaking with one voice and African solutions to African problems. We wonder in many specific cases what is the purpose of our decisions. In this sphere and many others, in how many situations have we not been led to bitter observation of fact, sometimes more humiliating than embarrassing, of the lack of the imperative need to speak with one voice on our own problems and on those that bring us together with our international partners. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, do not blame me for having taken much of your precious time. My understanding of my duty and of the responsibilities which you have honored me with dictates to me the obligation to always speak to you frankly and in all sincerity, while at the same time confining myself ultimately to your great wisdom. Of course, our agenda has a number of issues to which I will refer and address later on. The Palestinian question and the granting of observer status to the State of Israel is one of those specific issues which I will address later. I would like at this juncture just stress two aspects. I would like just at this, that is the first one, the need for a serene debate, far from any attempt to exploit this issue for political purposes, to become aware clearly of the relationship between the unwavering position of the African Union on the cause of the Palestinian people and the recognition of observer status for Israel. Our commitment to supporting the Palestinian people in their legitimate quest for freedom and independence, and their inalienable right to the establishment of their own national state alongside the State of Israel, in conformity with the relevant decisions of the African Union and the United Nations based on the principle of two states living together in peace, harmony, and mutual respect, and is unchanging and can only continue to grow stronger. The second aspect is my intimate conviction that the observer status granted to Israel in full compliance with the third criteria, which governs the matter, makes it possible to give our organization more latitude and the possibility of playing its role in the promotion of our decisions on the issue, exactly like the Afro-Arab countries, which have made the recognition of Israel an instrument in the service of peace and the quest for the best ways and means for the confirmation of the principle of two Palestinian and Israeli states living in perfect harmony. The second specific issue relates to our partnerships. The proliferation of these partnerships, a sign of interest in Africa and the dynamism of our continent and its organization, no longer allows us to engage in them without really revisiting our approaches to such partnerships. It is imperative to focus them on concrete, transformative and integrating mega projects in 5 priority areas of peace and energy, infrastructure and energy, climate change, innovative development financing, training of youth and empowerment of women. These projects currently under execution require the mobilization of substantial financial resources to achieve the structural transformation of our economies. This is the only way to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth capable of cushioning the impact of shocks such as financial crisis, the effects of climate change and pandemics. I hope that the summits that we are planning this year with our partners will be decisive moments for the implementation of our vision of international partnerships of Africa with the rest of the world. Such a redefinition of our strategic partnerships constitutes, in my view, a decisive lever for the role of Africa in the design of a new world order in harmony with our hopes. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I now have the honor of requesting His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Congo, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to make his statement. Thank you. Sorry.
Your Excellency, Felix Shisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and outgoing Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellency, Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal and incoming Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellency Moussa Faki Mohamed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished ministers, commissioners, excellencies, ambassadors, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me welcome you all to the land of origins on behalf of the people and government of Ethiopia. Let me also take this opportunity to celebrate our reunion in Addis Ababa after a 2-year disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, I wish to express my appreciation to the entire leadership of our union, and particularly to His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa for providing exemplary leadership in our collective response to the challenge of the pandemic. Over the past 2 years, we have struggled not only against the human cost of the pandemic, but also an inequitable system of vaccine distribution, arbitrary travel bans, border closures, lockdowns, and misinformation about the value of vaccines. Most importantly, as Africans, we have also learned that cooperation and collaboration is vital, not only for our health, but also for our collective survival. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our union has committed to undertake ambitious plans designed to transform our continent and create the Africa we want. We want a prosperous Africa based on sustainable and equitable development. We want a politically united continent that aspires to fulfill the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of an African Renaissance. Fulfilling our aim of birthing the Africa we want through robust implementation of Agenda 2063 and its flagship project will require us to make extraordinary efforts collectively. Our theme for 2022 is nutrition and food security. Over the past year, acute food insecurity in Africa has increased by over 60% as the effect of COVID-19 continue to aggravate our fragile economies. Floods, droughts, desert locusts, and other climate-related natural disasters have increased food insecurity for millions of our citizens. With 60% of the world's arable land in Africa, it is of utmost importance that we need to use our natural asset to maximize agricultural output and feed our people without reliance on external assistance. In the past 2 years, Ethiopia has made substantial investment in intensifying in summer wheat production through irrigation. Our farmers have been able to control and manage production factors to maximize yields using irrigation. Nationally, we have attained production over 20 million quintals of irrigation wheat farmed on over 500,000 hectares. This has generated nearly 60 billion birr in income to our farmers. These efforts are generating great results and will, in the imaginable future, begin to contribute to our food security and self-sufficiency, despite the climate variability our region is confronted with. One of the toughest challenges we face in Ethiopia is dealing with the effect of deforestation. While a century ago, Ethiopia's forest coverage was 35%, over the past 2 decades, our forest coverage stands at just 4%. We believe afforestation is one of the most effective ways of climate change mitigation. Beginning in 2019, we launched a major reforestation initiative under the slogan Green Legacy. Our aim was to plant 20 billion trees across the country over the course of a 4-year period. In a mere 3 years, we managed to plant 18 billion seedlings. And this year, with the Green Legacy Initiative in its final year, we will not only meet our national target, but plan to surpass the target by reaching 25 billion. Additionally, through this initiative, we have sent seedlings to neighboring countries to inspire regional efforts. If we can collaborate to spread the message of green legacy in the continent and implement measures that maximize our food security and self-sufficiency, we will be able to guarantee our citizens the basic necessity of life without reliance on charity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa's voice on the world stage needs to be heard loud and clear. Africa must also be represented on important international bodies. Today, more than 7 decades after the creation of the United Nations, Africa remains a junior partner without meaningful input or role in the system of international governance. This is particularly true of the United Nations, where Africa lacks representation on the Security Council and is underrepresented in a variety of ways. It is the right time to reform and revitalize the United Nations system to reflect current global realities and ensure that it is a more representative and equitable body. Only fair representation and transparency in those institutions can usher in a just era in multilateralism. Consistent with our Esluini Consensus of 2005, we should collectively insist that Africa's reasonable request for no less than 2 permanent seats and 5 non-permanent seats in the UN Security Council be adopted. Equally important is Africa's media representation on the international stage. Africa is often portrayed in international media negatively. The endless representation of the continent troubled by civil wars, hunger, corruption, greed, disease, and poverty is demeaning and dehumanizing, and likely driven by a calculated strategy and agenda. This stereotypical and negative media representation of Africa not only disinforms the rest of the world about our continent, but also shapes the way we see ourselves as Africans. Telling our own stories and shaping our own narratives must be our top priority. In this regard, I would like to propose to this august body the establishment of an African Union Continental Media House. This media house could be organized to provide authoritative news and information on our continent, fight disinformation, promote our collective agenda, and offer opportunities for Pan-African voice to be heard. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace and security are critical issues affecting our continent. Despite the African Union's intensive engagement in addressing peace and security challenges of the continent, guided by the maxim, African solution to African problems, new and complex problems that undermine our unity and sovereignty continue to emerge. In this respect, the past year was particularly challenging to our continent in general and my own country, Ethiopia, in particular. Ethiopia's challenge was internal in nature and a matter of maintaining law and order. But resolution of our internal matters was made exceedingly difficult by the role played by external actors. I wish to take this opportunity to thank you all for your support, solidarity, and understanding as we underwent these trying times. As you are aware, despite the intransigence of the other side in this conflict, my government has taken a variety of measures to minimize the loss of life and destruction of property. We have implemented unilateral withdrawal from conflict area and used force that is necessary to ensure law and order. As a gesture of goodwill, we have released high-profile suspects with a view of creating conducive environment for peace. We shall leave no stone unturned in our search for peace in our country. Consistent with our commitment to peace, to peaceful resolution of conflict, we have recently launched an inclusive national dialogue platform with formal legislation. Our commitment to pursuing lasting and durable peace in our country shall remain steadfast. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest lesson that Ethiopia has learned over the past year is that without the solidarity of our African brothers and sisters, our existence as a nation would have been at great risk. This affirms the wisdom of our forefathers and foremothers in their dream of Pan-Africanism. The old saying is true: united we stand, divided we fall. Today, we stand proud and tall as Africans in the shadow of those who struggled to liberate and unite Africa. Our steadfast unity is the anchor and the foundation of our Agenda 2063. A continent of 1.3 billion people, a substantial percentage of them young and dynamic, will drive Africa's prosperity and pull it out of poverty as we set forth in our Agenda 2063. Also, our Continental Free Trade Agreement holds the greatest promise of effectively realizing continental integration and development. The potential for increased intra-Africa trade, free movement of people, and investment and self-reliance is a beacon for Africa's renaissance. Instead of depending solely on trade out of Africa, our collective effort to boost intra-Africa trade will protect us from the fluctuation of global economic and political change. Similarly, the potential for continent-wide tourism remains untapped. It is part of aspiration of 5 of Agenda 2063, which seeks to create an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. The more we know each other, the more we are able to cooperate and resist the force that seek to divide and undermine us. You may recall, a mere 2 months ago, efforts were underway by some in the international community to create an atmosphere of fear, to drive expatriates out of Ethiopia and discourage travel to Ethiopia. Those efforts were not successful and will not be successful. Indeed, many fellow Africans joined the Great Ethiopian Diaspora Homecoming Challenge and proved to the world that Ethiopia is a safe and culturally rich tourist destination. As a key pillar of our national reform agenda, tourism potential within Ethiopia has been augmented greatly in the past 2 years, with many natural endowments developed to complement the historic and cultural heritage that already exists. Ethiopia remains open and welcomes all of our fellow African brothers and sisters. Finally, let me once again convey the warm welcome of the Ethiopian people and reiterate Ethiopia's commitment to do everything in our power to continue to create an enabling environment for the African Union in our collective efforts to deliver the Africa we want through robust implementation of Agenda 2063. God bless Ethiopia. God bless Africa. Thank you for your attention.
Sound of a distant drum and a mystery that I can't touch. It's the sound of the smile that the people share that makes me happy there. Sing it, sing it, sing it, sing it, sing it.
Thank you, Excellency. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, who will address the Assembly via visual conference. Thank you.
Excellences, chers invités, mesdames et messieurs, je vous remercie de me donner...
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my sincere gratitude to you for affording me this opportunity to address the Assembly today and to welcome the Deputy Secretary General, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, who is stepping in for me. Africa is a continent of hope. For the past 20 years, the African Union has contributed to bringing to life this hope to enable the continent attain its full potential. From the CFTA to the recent launching of the Decade of Financial and Economic Inclusion for Women, and also the transformation of food and agricultural systems, cooperation between the African Union and the United Nations Organization is stronger today more than ever before. By the same token, both organizations are working hard to implement the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063, and this is really a cornerstone in our relationship. Your common vision and your unity of purpose is relevant today. We are living through very difficult times. Injustice is deeply entrenched in global systems, and the African people suffer the most. And because of the unequal distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, the rate of vaccination in the high-income countries is 7 times higher than the vaccination rate in African countries. A morally decadent global financial system has abandoned African countries, depriving the African people of the necessary investment opportunities, reducing growth prospects, and locking our African countries in an endless spiral of debt and staggering interest rates. The combat against nation and insufficient action to slow down climate change is affecting mostly the most vulnerable. The immoral inequalities is choking the African continent, stoking the embers of conflicts and political, economic, ethnic, social tensions, violation of human rights, violence against women, terrorism.
De personnes sont déplacées sur tout le continent.
A cafa do continente e as instituições democráticas estão em perigo. O nosso mundo precisa de solidariedade e podem contar conosco e com a família das Nações Unidas para apoiar a África e nos nossos 4 motores de reconstrução, a saber, primeiro, nós devemos proporcionar as vacinas e a vacinação para todos e para todos. Saúdo a liderança na criação de uma equipa especial africana para a aquisição das vacinas, a VAT e de outros mecanismos que permitiram fornecer mais 34 milhões de doses de vacinas contra a Covid em todo o continente. Saúdo igualmente o anúncio recente da produção de vacinas a partir deste ano na África do Sul e em outros países africanos. Solicito a todos os países desenvolvidos e a todos os fabricantes para que possam se juntar à causa da equipa especial VAT e ao mecanismo COVAX. Convido-os a criarem condições necessárias para que o número de países africanos capazes de produzir testes, vacinas e tratamentos em África sejam multiplicados, pessoalmente resolvendo os problemas de propriedade intelectual e fornecendo o apoio técnico e financeiro necessário. Também os peço para que se preparem para a próxima epidemia, investindo nos cuidados de saúde primária, na vacinação de rotina, que vão salvar vidas, na vigilância de saúde pública e apoiando a ação levada
tel que le Centre africain de prévention et de contrôle des maladies. Excellencies. Second, we need to ignite the engine of economic recovery by reforming the global financial system. Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals depends on supporting massive investments in strong health and education systems, in job creation, especially in the green and care sectors, and in universal social protection, gender equality, and opportunities for young people. But the deck is stacked against Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is facing cumulative economic growth per capita over the next 5 years that is 75% less than the rest of the world. We need to accelerate investment into Africa. We need to deliver real investment resources, including by redirecting special drawing rights to countries that need support now, reforming the international debt architecture for the future, increasing concessional forms of finance, and ensuring that African countries with sound economic fundamentals are not unduly penalized by markets and the ratings institutions. And we need to fulfill the immense promise of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Third, we need to ignite the engine of a green recovery across Africa. Africa contributes just 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but many of the worst impacts of climate change are being felt there. To address today's tragic reality, we need a radical boost in funding for adaptation and mitigation on the continent. The Glasgow commitment to double adaptation finance from $20 billion must be implemented. But this is not enough. Access and eligibility systems must be reviewed to allow developing countries to get the finance they need on time. I commend EU member states for ambitious nationally determined contributions and adopting the African Union Green Stimulus Programme. I am committed to working with the global community to match Africa's climate ambitions with the resources, financing, and technologies it needs to accelerate the transition from coal to renewables and create new green jobs. I'm calling on wealthier countries to make good on the $100 billion climate finance commitment to developing countries starting this year, and all to account private sector partners who have made commitments so far. Our planet will speed past the 1.5 degree temperature thresholds without steep emission cuts this decade by all major economies. We are in emergency mode, and we need all hands on deck. COP27 in Egypt will be an opportunity for Africa and our world. And fourth, we need to ignite the engine of peace across Africa. Conflicts and violence have many roots, from economic inequalities and competition for scarce resources to ethnic and religious tensions, among others. African states are proudly multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural. And the EU is about showing how people can coexist, even flourish, by working together. That requires inclusive and participatory structures that speak to this diversity in all its richness through governance that delivers for all. We need to bolster platforms for inclusivity, especially for young Africans. We need connectivity to access information, communication, education, and jobs. The United Nations is committed to working with the African Union to strengthen democratic and responsive governance structures and people's faith in them. This requires leadership on all sides. For example, we have signed an important new framework to ensure the EU peace support operations are planned and conducted in full compliance with international human rights and humanitarian law. Our recent shared commitment to take forward a joint strategic assessment on security in the Sahel to improve our collective effort is another example. And I reaffirm my appeal for a cessation of hostilities, humanitarian access, and inclusive national dialogue in Ethiopia, the seat of the African Union and a country that is critical to continental stability. And I pledge the full support of my good offices to silence the guns across the continent. From our joint missions and programs, to strengthening electoral processes and peaceful transfers of power, to the UN's peacekeeping and peacebuilding efforts, to our commitment to robust support to African forces and interventions to tackle terrorism across Africa, including my advocacy for the UN Security Council to support the predictable financing of Africa-led operations under Chapter 7. My report on our common agenda offers a fresh opportunity to rethink and reposition our approach to peace in Africa and ensure our peace architecture is fit for purpose to address the rapid shifts and changes we see across the continent and around the world. I encourage your continued engagement as we advance this agenda together. Excelências, não é fácil alcançar a paz, mas a paz é absolutamente necessária. Continuemos a trabalhar juntos, com um objetivo comum em mente, com e para os povos de África. Vamos dar vida às palavras do falecido arcebispo Desmond Tutu: a minha humanidade está dependente da vossa, porque apenas juntos somos humanos. Ao iniciar-se esta cimeira, reitero que as Nações Unidas se orgulham de percorrer este caminho convosco na luta pela dignidade, pela igualdade, pela paz e pela justiça para todos. Com solidariedade e sempre guiados por um espírito de humanidade e de esperança. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now invite His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Shitai, Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, to address the Assembly. Your Excellency.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of
Your Excellency,
Almighty God, the Most Merciful,
Your Excellency, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, Heads of States and Government, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency President Mahmoud Abbas, who sends you his warmest greetings and wishes you success at this distinguished assembly, I'm deeply honored to deliver the speech of the State of Palestine. It gives me great pleasure to congratulate the Republic of Senegal and His Excellency President Macky Sall on assuming the presidency of the current session of the African Union. We wish him every success. We also extend our gratitude to the Democratic Republic of Congo and President Felix for the presidency of the previous African Union session. This year's summit is being held under the increasingly important theme, building resilience for food security and nutrition on the African continent. accelerate the human capital, social and economic development. Despite the many challenges the state of Palestine faces, our people assure you that we stand with you in achieving your priorities to the best of our ability, expertise, and competencies. In 2013, this auspicious body opened its arms for the Palestinian people and embraced the state of Palestine as an observer state within your Assembly of States, a show of solidarity with us in our over 7 decades of long struggle to liberate ourselves from the yoke of settler colonialism and military occupation. Of course, the people on the continent of Africa know only too well the devastation and dehumanization that are the hallmarks of colonialism and related system of institutionalized racial discrimination. Your Excellencies, I'm sorry to report to you that the situation of the Palestinian people has only grown more precarious. A few days ago, Amnesty International published a report confirming that Israel is not only guilty for denying Palestinians our human rights, but that Israel is also committing the most grave crimes, the crime of apartheid. From the report, I quote, almost all of Israel's civilian administration and military authorities, as well as the governmental and quasi-governmental institutions, are involved in the enforcement of the system of apartheid against Palestinians across Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territory, and against Palestinian refugees and their descendants outside of Palestine. The patterns prescribed acts perpetuated by Israel, both inside Israel and in the occupied territory, form a part of a systematic as well as a widespread attack directed against Palestinian population, and that the inhuman and humane acts committed within the context of this attack have been committed within the intention to maintain this system and amount to the crime against humanity of apartheid under both the Apartheid Convention and the Rome Statute. Israel has created in its maintaining a system of oppression, domination of the Palestinians through 4 main strategies. 1, deprivation of economic and social rights. 2nd, segregation and control. 3rd, dispossession of land and property. 4th, fragmentation into domains of control. Your Excellencies, a Human Rights Watch Foundation last year also stated that Israeli authorities had crossed the threshold by committing crimes of apartheid and persecution. Across the Palestinian territories under its control, Israel has demonstrated intent to maintain the domination of Jewish Israelis over Palestinians. In conjunction with that intention, Palestinians have been subjected to systematic of oppression and inhumane treatment. Together, these 3 elements constitute apartheid. When he was Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu said in 2019, Israel is not a state of all its citizens, the nation of the state of the Jewish people only. Currently, 2 million Palestinians live in Israel, are discriminated against. 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank live under direct Israeli settler colonialism. And 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza have been put under siege for the last 14 years. Nearly 7 million Palestinian refugees suffer from Israeli racist policies that deny them the right to return to their homes. Your Excellencies, B'Tselem, an Israeli information center for human rights, asserted that Israel is an apartheid state. It concluded that the Israeli regime enacts in all the territories under its control, inside the Green Line, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank, including Gaza, an apartheid regime, one organizing principle lies at the base of the wide array of Israeli policies, advancing and perpetuating the supremacy of one group, the Israelis, over another, the Palestinians. Based on these invulnerable facts documented by neutral bodies, Israel should not be rewarded for should Israel be rewarded for its adoption of apartheid, which targets the Palestinians with discrimination policies related to land, planning and housing, and hindering agriculture and industrial development for the Palestinians. Mr. Chairman, Israel should not be rewarded for deepening this fracture following its military occupation of the Palestinian territory, including Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip in 1967, which has led to the establishment of a military system and separation of legal and administrative system to govern the occupied Palestinian territory that has resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. In Israel today, you have no partners for peace. We have a government that is only advocating settler colonialism and apartheid policies. Excellencies, Israel, the occupying power, should not be rewarded for its unlawful killings, torture, administrative detention, persecution, severe injuries inflicted upon the defenseless Palestinian people and depriving them from their freedoms. Israel should not be rewarded for illegally constructing 280 colonial settlements in the West Bank, inhabiting by more than 700,000 Jewish settlers. Israel should not be rewarded for unilaterally annexing East Jerusalem and pursuing measures to continue to change the status of the demographic composition of the Palestinian territories. Israel should not be rewarded for building the annexation and the expansion wall on the Palestinian occupied territory, deemed illegal by the International Court of Justice. Israel should not be rewarded for its crimes, including the ongoing siege, bombardment, killings, targeting civilians, and destroying infrastructure in the Gaza Strip in flagrant violation of international law. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, Israel should not be rewarded for the imposition of movement of restrictions and the closures of the Gaza Strip, the confiscation of land, the creation of isolated besieged enclaves of Bantustans in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the forcible transfer and displacement of Palestinians, the violation of residency of civil rights, as well as depriving refugees from their rights. Mr. Chairman, today Israel treats the Palestinians as the hewers of wood and the drawers of water. This should stop. Our faith lies in your alignment with principles of truth, freedom, and peace and justice. We are confident in your willingness to support the Palestinian people under Israel's prolonged occupation. Israel should never be rewarded for its violation and for the apartheid regime it does impose on the Palestinian people. As an entity, Israel has progressed from extremism to militarism to colonial expansion. This must stop. Based on your historic stand and your support for the Palestinian right, and bear relevant decisions of the United Nations and previous African Union assemblies, we call for the withdrawal and objection of Israeli observer status at the African Union. We believe that granting Israel observer status at the African Union is undeserved reward. This actually a reward that encourages Israel to continue violating international treaties, breaching all agreements with us. With this reward, it gains impunity and accountability. I am confident in your inner wisdom and judgment. The African Union has constantly resisted colonialism and apartheid. It has continued rejected and condemned Israeli discriminatory policies and practices. The time is right to condemn Israel for its crimes of persecution and apartheid. to end Israeli colonial occupation and enable the Palestinian people to have their right to self-determination towards realization and independence of a state of Palestine on the borders of 4th of June 1967 with East Jerusalem as the capital, and to allow the return of the Palestinian refugees. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, I stand before you today to affirm our position, vision, and peace initiative announced by His Excellency President Mahmoud Abbas during his speech before the United Nations General Assembly on 24th of September 2021. In his speech, our President called for launching political negotiations under the sole auspices of the Quartet based on international legitimacy and the Arab Peace Initiative, leading to a just and comprehensive solution for the question of Palestine, to end Israeli occupation of our land and people toward the independent state of Palestine on the border of June 4th, 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Let me close by wishing you a successful and fruitful summit. We hope that Africa, its countries, and the people will achieve their aspirations for prosperity based on comprehensive sustainable growth, integration and political unity, good governance, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. We hope for the peaceful and secure Africa, where development prevails and exists and is shaped by the abilities of women and youth, helping to make Africa a strong, influential player in the international arena. We wish the Republic of Ethiopia security and stability. Long live Africa with its friendship with Palestine. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Felix Shisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Chairperson of the African Union, to deliver his opening statement. Your Excellency, sir.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Moussa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Our meeting here today in the hallowed premises of the African Union, particularly in the Nelson Mandela Hall, gives me real joy and satisfaction because for the past 2 years to today, the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. This 21st century plague has actually made it impossible for us to meet in person. There is a glimmer of hope for life to return to normalcy in our respective countries, and this thanks to the brilliance and the common efforts of our member states and scientists in a remarkable spirit of international solidarity. We need to step up our efforts and strengthen this spirit of solidarity in order to overcome once and for all the coronavirus and also ensure the economic recovery of our countries and to ensure a better future of our peoples on the planet Earth. However, considering that this is still the very early days of the year 2022, allow me to convey to our organization, to all the sons and daughters of Africa, and as well to all our partners, my ardent wishes of peace, security, stability, prosperity, as well as renewed and fruitful cooperation. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, definitely you must have noticed that during this session, our agenda is long and heavy, but we have to exhaust the agenda in 2 days. That will require that we focus and apply our minds to the pressing issues of the day in order to give the African Union the tools to fully play its role in the quest for solutions to the challenges and problems facing the African people. In a short while, as I pass over the baton to the incoming chair, I will give you a detailed account of what I did by way of activities as the chairperson of the African Union. But for now, I would like to conclude by saying that I now declare open the 31st ordinary session of the African Union Assembly. And as I say thank you to you, I want to wish you all successful deliberations. Thank you again.
Thank you, Your Excellence. Next is the announcement of the Bureau of the Assembly by the overall Dean of Ambassadors, Ambassador Yusuf from Comoros. I now hand over to His Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Union, to guide the process. Thank you, sir.
J'annonce l'avenue du doyen du corps diplomatique.
I'll now invite the overall dean to take us through the new bureau.
Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Conférence, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement et chefs de délégation, Monsieur le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, j'ai l'insigne honneur de vous présenter la composition du nouveau bureau de la conférence
of the incoming Bureau of the African Union for the year 2022. After broad consultations, our Bureau for 2022 would be as follows. Chairperson, Republic of Senegal. First Vice Chairperson, consultations are still underway. Rapporteur, Democratic Republic of Congo. Second Vice Chair, Libya. Third Vice Chairperson, the Republic of Angola. Your Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and government, this is how our new bureau for the year 2022 will look like. And I submit. I thank you.
Voilà. Pour la première vice-présidence, la région de l'Est est en
First Vice
consultation.
Chair, the Eastern region is still consulting at the moment. Consultations are ongoing, and once they are ready, they will communicate their decision. So we've taken due note of the composition of the Bureau for the year 2022. I thank you.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les
Your
chefs d'État
Excellencies,
et de gouvernement,
heads of state and government,
Madame Amina Mohamed,
Madam Amina Mohamed, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Moussa Faki Mohamed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, distinguished participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen.
il y a un an,
1 year ago, you entrusted to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, through me, the chairship of the African Union. Today, it is with gratitude that I present before our august institution and through it the entire African people to report on the accomplishment of the mandate that was entrusted to me. At the start of the chairship, I had, like my predecessor, President Cyril Ramaphosa, to pay first absolute priority to the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and the cohort of variants thereof. A significant progress has been made. Let me avail myself of this opportunity to commend all efforts deployed and pursued by President Cyril Ramaphosa, African Union champion, for the important role he played in the process of acquisition of vaccines, most particularly in the promotion of their production on the African continent. It is also the moment for us to pay tribute to the African CDC under the leadership of its director, Dr. John Nkengasong, as well as all the health staffers of the continent. It is still urgent to carry out empowerment and operationalization of the African CDC and the effective establishment of the African Medicines Agency. To illustrate this empowerment, we should recall that in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the fight against the pandemic was marked by the development of a product codenamed Jubas-C by a group of Congolese scientists of great renown. It is a molecule made from medicinal plants in Congo and approved by the World Health Organization. Africa should encourage all of these scientists to pool their efforts in the pursuit of the fight against this scourge. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this year was a great year of culture. The African Cultural Renaissance Charter, adopted in 2006 in Khartoum, got all of the ratifications expected from member states. Its entry into force since the 25th of May 2021 permits the affirmation of the common cultural identity of the African peoples. To go further, it will be important that our organization should decree a decade devoted to the promotion of African culture, to give decisive momentum to African cultural renaissance. This great cultural year was also marked by powerful initiatives such as the translation of the African Union anthem into Lingala, the production of a Pan-African song, or the institution of the Pan-African Festival of Kinshasa and the organization of a conference on the recovery of cultural assets. I would like, in particular, to underscore the innovation of the celebration of the African Cultural Day, African Cultural and Afro-Descendant Day, and the institution of the Pan-African Grand Prix for Literature. The World Day of African and Afro-Descendant Culture, instituted by UNESCO in 2019, was officially celebrated and for the first time by the African Union on the 24th of January this year through ceremonies that I chaired in Kinshasa in my capacity as chair of the African Union. On that occasion, we also established in my country a Center for African and Afro-Descendant Culture. The institution of a Pan-African Grand Prix for Literature devoted to literary works pursuant to our own vision, resolutely Pan-African, constitutes a major event. Presided by a prestigious jury of 10 African personalities of the world of literature. The award has been awarded to a Cameroonian, Oswald Lewat, for his novel titled Les Aquatiques. I would like here to extend gratitude to that grand jury for their devotion and professionalism, and to extend my warm congratulations to the laureate. Your Excellencies, with your leave, I will hand the award to the laureate at the end of my statement as a sign of our common homage to African creativity. And to crown everything, we cannot leave unmentioned the addition of the Congolese rumba to the list of world intangible assets, as well as that of the Thiers-Bourdienne, the irresistible Senegalese meal of great colors, flavors, and flavors. Your Excellencies, silencing the guns on the continent is still a major imperative. However, we have to walk the talk. It is high time that we consolidate the African architecture of peace and security, and to ensure the general operationalization of the African standby force. It is Kwame Nkrumah foresaw, one of the illustrious founding forefathers of our Pan-African organization. From the get-go of my chairship, I revived the tripartite negotiation process between the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and the Republic of Sudan to seek a constructive and sustainable solution to the dispute concerning the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam through a win-win process, mindful of the respective and mutual interest of these brotherly countries. Also, in situations of war and conflict that keep threatening peace on the continent, women and children are among the major victims, especially because of rape and sexual violence that has been catalogued. In the face of this scourge, consultations of women coming from all regions of the continent were organized in Kinshasa, as well as training sessions for women peace mediators. Also, in November 2021, we organized in Kinshasa a conference of men on positive masculinity, in the presence of 8 heads of state and government and various other participants, including the chairperson of the commission, and that meeting was a hybrid session. That conference marked a real watershed with the adoption of the Kinshasa Declaration and the call to action of heads of state of the African Union to positive masculinity in leadership for elimination of violence against women and the girl child. Conferences were also organized in Kinshasa with heartbreaking testimonies of women victims of rapes and sexual violence. They call for the establishment of funds to benefit the victims. The need for positive masculinity also led to the organization in Kinshasa of a major conference on gender equality. Also, this chairship encouraged all African member states to effectively launch the zero tolerance campaign against sexual violence and violence based on gender. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the face of the multiplicity of acts of access to power through unconstitutional means, we should recall that the Constitutive Act of the African Union, in its Article 4, condemns and rejects unconstitutional changes of government. However, after several decades of problematic implementation of this charter, it is important for us to reflect and assess the principles, rules and mechanisms of our Lomé Declaration adopted in the year 2000 on constitutional changes of government. We also need to think of a better harmonization of approaches of our regional economic communities and their synergy with the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, as well as the Commission. Similarly, we also have to strengthen and domesticate continental and regional instruments of governance, such as the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. They are instruments for preventing violence of all kinds. Against this backdrop of good governance, the Democratic Republic of Congo not only acceded to, but also encouraged member countries of the African Union who have not yet done so to accede to the virtuous circle of the African Peer Review Mechanism, the APRM. We should also pursue institutional and financial reforms. We should indeed carry out strengthening of the role of the Pan-African Parliament, ensure the effectiveness of the African Court of Justice on Human and People's Rights, as well as broaden the initiative, the decision-making powers of the Commission. The issue of maltreatment of people living with albinism and the respect of their fundamental rights speaks to the conscience and the active humaneness of each of our member states on the one hand, and the competent entities of the African Union on the other hand. It is within this framework that Kinshasa hosted in October 2021 the first Pan-African conference on awareness raising on albinism. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, investing in sustainable and equitable development in the post-COVID period is to develop the capacity of Africa to manufacture innovative products in science, in technology, in digital economy, in green economy, inter alia. Our youth are ready to position themselves as major stakeholders in all sectors of globalization notably through access to youth credits and through the multiplication of industrial parks devoted to startups. It is therefore indispensable to accord important support to the African Fund for Youth and to develop the Youth Academy for Change. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the implementation of Agenda 2063 also picked up momentum in the year 2021 through the effective start of the AFCFTA in January 2021. Against this backdrop, we traveled to Accra in July 2021 for the inauguration of the headquarters of the Permanent Secretariat of our Free Trade Area organization and discussed on the coordination of strategies to speed up its implementation. In the same vein, there is the important objective to construct the Grand Inga Dam as a vector of regional integration, industrialization, and African renaissance. Concerning the existential challenges of climate change that threaten the future of mankind and even the human species, Africa, that possesses the second lung of the world, that is the Congo Basin, is ready to provide solutions of collective survival to mankind, but on condition that the world also accepts to pay the requisite price. Inter alia, this is the message I conveyed. I strove to develop as representative and spokesperson of our organization with the support of the entire Bureau of the Assembly and the support of the Chair of the African Union Commission to develop diplomacy of active presence, increasing the visibility and promotion of the legitimate interests of Africa within several international circles and during meetings with our strategic partners. In this regard, permit me to underscore that the relations of the continent with its external partners should always meet certain existential requirements, namely ensure mutual respect and avoid unwarranted interference in the domestic affairs of our states, with sometimes as a corollary unfair sanctions imposed against some of our member states, here for instance against the Republic of Zimbabwe. I call for the lifting of the sanctions against that brotherly country, whose negative impacts are noxious to the economy and to the well-being of the brotherly people of Zimbabwe. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before I wrap up my statement, I would like once more to extend gratitude to Africa, thank our august assembly for the confidence and the trust placed in my country. Rest assured, through this chairship, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, regained full awareness of its historic role as fount of union and of African unity. The Democratic Republic of Congo intends to continue to play this role tirelessly. I wish full success to my successor, my brother, Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal. May God bless and protect Africa. Mungu amibariki. Many thanks, shukran. Muito obrigado. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, to the podium for the handover ceremony.
Pile. Pile.
C'est la peine de descendre.
Elle n'était pas au podium.
Merci.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, avant la photo de famille,
Excellency, before the group
le
photo,
président sortant de l'Union,
the outgoing chairman of the African Union wants to award the prize that he announced in his statement. Mr. President.
I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union, to deliver his acceptance statement. Your Excellency, sir.
Voilà. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement,
Heads of state and government, dear colleagues,
Monsieur le Président, Felix Antoine Shisekedi Chilombo,
President Felix Antoine Shisekedi Chilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the outgoing chairman,
le secrétaire général adjoint,
Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations,
la Commission,
Chairperson of the African Union Commission,
Mesdames, Messieurs les ambassadeurs et chefs de délégation,
ambassadors, heads of delegation,
en votre
ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf and on my own behalf, I would like first of all to thank the government and the people of Ethiopia for the friendly welcome and the generous hospitality that they accord us once again in this legendary city of Addis Ababa, the cradle of our dream of freedom and African unity. I do measure the honor and the responsibility that go along with the trust that you have placed in me, together with the members of the Bureau, to steer the destiny of our organization during 1 year. I thank you and reassure you of our commitment to work together and in concert with all the member countries in the exercise of our term of office. I want to pay tribute to the founding fathers of the organization. 6 decades after, their enlightened vision continues to inspire our effort to live together and enlighten our march of solidarity towards the ideal of African integration. It is rightly in this Pan-Africanist spirit that President Leopold Sedar Senghor had proposed at the OAU summit of July 1964 to establish a permanent political and moral authority of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government in order to give a high-level impetus to the conduct of the affairs of the continent. This is how this responsibility of current chairman of our organization emerged, a responsibility which President Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo has carried out with consistency and devotion. Thank you, dear Felix, for the considerable efforts that you have made in the service of our continent. While our union is celebrating its 20th anniversary, this year, we can be proud of the progress made within the framework of the major initiatives such as NEPAD, PIDA, APRM, Vision 2063, institutional reform, the Great Green Wall, AFCFTA, and more recently our coordinated response to COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, we still face many and urgent challenges, whether it relates to peace and security, the fight against terrorism, the unconstitutional change of government, protection of environment, health, and economic and social development. The urgent need for peace and security reminds us of a special responsibility in the fight against terrorism, the peaceful settlement of disputes between member states, and to take care of the situations of internal crisis. We cannot turn our face away from all these lives that are lost, the bereaved families, the millions of displaced persons or refugees, these schools and health facilities that are closed, and disintegrated social cohesion. Our common sense call on us to silence the guns and entrench a culture of dialogue and consultation within the framework of the African Mechanism for Conflict Resolution. In fact, divisions delay our development, and therefore I call for a scrutiny of our conscience in order to have the peace of the brave, in order to devote ourselves to other urgent needs that are a source of concern. It therefore applies to this health crisis linked to the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to ensure as quickly as possible our pharmaceutical and medical sovereignty. I sincerely thank President Cyril Ramaphosa, who, with the support of the Commission and Africa CDC, has made all the necessary efforts in the response to COVID and also access to vaccine, as well as its production in Africa. In the face of the crisis, an ecosystem of hygienical products, pharmaceutical products, medical products has in fact been initiated on the continent. The production of vaccine is already underway in many countries, and others will see. Beyond the response to COVID, we need to maintain this dynamism by maintaining health issues on our agenda in order to support the emergence of an African pharmaceutical industry that can meet our essential needs and face pandemics like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. I would like also to draw the attention of our summit to the ravages caused by cancer, a silent killer, which causes more than 20 million deaths per year across the world, and more than 700,000 in Africa. We have to add to that 40% of our countries have no radiotherapy mechanisms or equipment to deal with this cancer. In fact, with this concern, the International Atomic Energy Agency has taken the initiative of Rays of Hope in order to support and build the capacities of African member states, particularly in the fight against cancer, thanks to nuclear technology, particularly medical imagery, nuclear medicine, and radiotherapy. I sincerely encourage our countries to support the campaign that is Rays of Hope, as it contributes to attaining the objectives of sustainable development and Agenda 2063. Our urgent needs are also related to the economic situation. Africa is lagging behind in the field of development, despite all the potentialities that we have. 30 million square kilometers, more than 1.3 billion inhabitants, important reserves in water and hydrocarbon, 60% of cultivable and arable lands, 40% of gold reserve, 85 to 95% of metal reserves, chrome, platinum, more than 50% of cobalt reserves and a third of reserves of bauxite. So in spite of these handicaps, Africa has the necessary capacity and potential to ensure the conditions of its emergence. Furthermore, our continent is making progress. The governments are settling down to task. There is a creative youth which undertakes certain ventures and succeeds. Millions of men and women are working, invest, and are creating wealth. All these positive energies contribute to the structural transformation of the continent by making Africa of modern infrastructures, roads, highways, railways, ports, airports emerge. And the industrial platforms and digital platforms, and rightly within the spirit of this Africa, which is on its way to emerge, should be the theme of our summit, and with the relevant proposal made by President Alassane Ouattara. Build the resilience in nutritional security on the African continent, ensure and accelerate human capital development and socio-economic development, and this reminds us of our urgent need to ensure food security and food sovereignty by producing more with agriculture, livestock, fishery, through the modernization of our production tools and methods of conservation and processing of our food produce. The improvement of the inputs, the control of water, development of the value chains, and the facilitation of access to markets. The emerging Africa should also rely on its own active forces, youth and women. Youth should remain as the very source of concern of our policies, because they are the majority of the population, and we cannot harness the demographic dividend if our youth are not given the necessary education and training which prepare them for active life. The situation of women, in fact, challenges us because women constitute the other half of the continent. Africa cannot develop when millions of women and young girls continue to suffer violent treatment that is meted out, which is unequal and is discriminatory against women. I want to make an appeal for a greater mobilization of the continent, the public authorities, public opinion, civil society, families and communities against all forms of violence to women and to young girls and for their empowerment. It is an essential condition for the progress of our continent and our collective well-being. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, if the destiny of the continent is in our hands, it also depends on the political, economic and financial governance which in fact we are facing in our countries. On your behalf, I will continue this advocacy for a more open multilateralism, which is more transparent and more inclusive, to begin with a more equitable representation of Africa on the UN Security Council in conformity with the Eswatini consensus. I also wish that we concentrate our efforts on the reform of economic and financial, international economic and financial governance for a better access of countries to the development financing resources. Our economies are underfinanced because the rules and rigid procedures impede the access of our countries to consistent resources in the long term and at rates that are excruciating and unbearable for the financing of development. Our economies are therefore poorly financed because they continue to pay interest rates that are very high because of an unequal evaluation of investment risk in Africa and an unequal system. In 2020, for example, while the entire world was suffering the impact of COVID-19, 18 out of the 32 African countries were evaluated by one of the agencies, that is, rating agencies that in fact brought down the evaluation and the rating of African countries, 56 as against 31%. So 20% of the rating parameters of our country depend on subjective factors, whether they are cultural, linguistic, and without any relation with the fundamentals that determine the stability of an economy. All these makes it that the perception of investment risk in Africa remains higher than the real risk, which in fact increases the insurance premium and obviously penalizes competitiveness of our economies. With the support of the Commission, I deem it necessary that we establish a task force of the Union to consider thoroughly the problem of the financing of our economies, including through the reforms of the rules of the OECD and the establishment of a Pan-African rating agency and the establishment of a financial stability mechanism on which the African Development Bank is already working. Other efforts could further be made on the harmonization of our national legislation and the exchange of the best practices in the mining industry and the oil industry for a fair remuneration of our resources. These projects could obviously take time, but I think it is necessary so that we move from claims, complaints to acts by laying the foundation of our efforts. In the immediate future, I will continue our advocacy for the reallotment of the special drawing rights with the historical emission of the SDR. $650 billion, and Africa could only have $33 billion. So, when you look at the impact of the crisis, Africa needs an additional financing of at least $252 billion by 2025 in order to cushion the shock and also to have its economic recovery. Consequently, I will continue our advocacy for the reallotment for African countries and according to the modalities to be agreed of $100 billion of the special drawing rights of the rich countries. And obviously, we need to reach the necessary amount that we need in order to support African economies, and this was already fixed at the Paris conference. A substantial amount of these special drawing rights, together with the IMF, can these be reallocated through the ADB, that is our Continental Bank, taking into account its role in the development financing and to support our efforts for recovery through quality investments, which obviously will motivate growth. In addition, in order to expand our possibilities of financing the major projects, development projects, it is high time to amend the agreement on the African Development Fund, that is the AD, which will enable it to accede to capital markets and to raise $33 billion, which will obviously supplement its own resources of $25 billion. More, in addition to the ADF resources, it will give more possibilities for development of our countries. I therefore appeal to our partners to ensure the modernization of the African Development Fund and also other similar institutions, more especially as the status has remained unchanged since its establishment in 1972. On your behalf, dear colleagues, I also have the firm intention to state clearly and loudly our message for renewed partnership that can be fairer and more equitable. More than 60 years of the first years of independence, Africa is more than ever before decided and determined to take its destiny in its own hands. Our continent cannot be a field which is just for the feast of others. We are open to all partnerships without exclusion, neither exclusiveness, on condition that it is mutually beneficial and respects our development priorities and our choice of society. In this spirit, I welcome the excellent results and outcome of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum of November 2021 and the Turkey-Africa Summit held in December last year. I confirm that our meeting with the European Union will meet with the same success, taking into account the preparations that are underway for this meeting, just like our partnership with Korea, Russia, Japan, and the Arab world, and obviously and without doubt with the United States. All these partnerships will be placed in the same dynamics in the renewed partnership, which is a win-win partnership, our choice of society and our options for our development. Another challenge for us is the energy transition within the framework of the fight against climate change and global warming, and Africa is a stakeholder. The margins of COP26 of Glasgow, developed countries have unilaterally adopted the decision to put an end to the external financing of fossil fuel, even the clean ones like gas, while some of them continue to lose more polluting sources like charcoal and fuel, diesel fuel. At the time, with important discoveries over the past years, gas opened for our countries real prospects of individual access to electricity and support to industrialization of the continent, put an end to the financing of gas will deeply affect and thwart our efforts of economic and social development. That is why, by remaining committed to the fight against climate change and global warming, and according to the principle of the common but differentiated responsibility, the joint and differentiated responsibility, it is legitimate that our countries claim for a fair and equitable energy transition. Together, let us mobilize ourselves for the success of COP27, which our brother President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be hosting this year. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, these challenges, we are going to face them by devoting more time to our discussions on vital issues for our countries, we'll work renewed and rationalize the working methods within the spirit of the institutional reform that we have been carrying out under the dynamic leadership of President Paul Kagame. The imperative need for result, in fact, to implement our reforms in order to improve the performances of the Union, including through the building of its financial capacities. I am thinking of the division of labor between the Union, the regional economic communities, and the regional mechanisms, the reform of the legal and quasi-legal organs, the operationalization of the Peace Fund and the African Standby Force, as well as a better articulation and use of our agencies. The Africa that we want is also the one that will also recover all its cultural heritage. The heritage that have been expoliated will remain at the heart of our agenda because it is an integral part of our civilizational identity and which links us to our past and is the path that we have to bequeath to future generations. The Africa that we want to build cannot obviously forget its cultural heritage. Time will not take away our collective memory. The weight of history and those of the present cannot prohibit and prevent our will to remove all the prejudices and that impede our march towards progress. We say yes to the receiving and giving process through dialogue and the dialogue of cultures and civilizations, but there can be no injunction against our civilization and our choices. In this spirit, I will leave no stone unturned in order to defend the interests of our continent with the support of the members of the Bureau and yours, dear colleagues. Thus, and together, we can bring our building block, the continental building block to our dreams, and Africa at peace, free, more united and more interdependent and showing solidarity, and Africa which is standing and which is marching towards greater progress and prosperity. Long live Africa, long live African Union, and I thank you for your attention.
Chers collègues, avant de poursuivre
before we continue our meeting, I want to recall that because of the commitment of President Shisekedi in promoting positive masculinity, I want to request that President Shisekedi be appointed as the champion, that is the champion for to put an end to violence against women. At present, I want to call upon the members of the Bureau to
En attendant la désignation du premier vice-président, je voudrais inviter
give
le
the
président de la
impressions
République du Niger
pending the appointment of the first vice chairman,
à faire son
and
appréciation
we
sur le
have
suivi de la zone
President
du Malawi, du Cabo
Bazoum,
Verde, de Sao Tomé,
Cabo Verde, Sao Tomé and Principe
Monsieur le
and
président de
Seychelles.
la République du Niger, vous avez la parole.
So, President of Niger, you have the floor.
Il s'agit de collègues nouvellement élus comme
These
membres du
are
bureau et qui
rather
participent
the
pour la
newly
première
elected colleagues who are participating for the first time in the assembly, in the meeting of the assembly.
Il s'agit
They are rather, the president, the chairman corrects himself to say these are the newly elected presidents, President of Niger, President of Zambia, President of Malawi, President of Cape Verde and Sao Tome and Principe and Seychelles. The tradition is that they say a few words at the assembly.
Sure. Monsieur Macky Sall, Président en exercice.
Mr. Macky Sall, the current chairman of the African Union,
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Excellencies, heads of state and government,
Excellences, Messieurs les anciens chefs d'État,
Excellencies, former heads of
Excellences,
state,
Madame la Secrétaire générale adjointe des Nations Unies,
Deputy
Amina Mohamed,
Secretary General of the United Nations, Madame Amina Mohamed,
Président
Mr. Moussa Faki Mohamed, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission,
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
avant tout vous saluer.
First of all, I want to
remercier
greet
de
you and
m'accueillir
thank you
aujourd'hui
for welcoming me
dans ce
today
cadre prestigieux
within
de
this
la conférence des chefs d'État
prestigious
dans la salle Nelson Mandela que j'ai plaisir à retrouver
assembly of the heads of state in Nelson Mandela Hall, where I can draw from the values of brotherhood, solidarity and Pan-African commitment that is enshrined in this great figure of Nelson Mandela, to whose memory I bow. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, I want to recognize the presence of former heads of state, President Issoufou Mahamadou. He is the one who, on the next day of his election at the helm of Niger in 2011, affirmed his commitment to the African Charter, democracy, elections and good governance, and his commitment to respect the Constitution of Niger, and also by complying with the Republican legality. He held his promise. And for the first time in Niger, we have a democratically elected president who even took over. On 2 April last year, I was sworn in, and I solemnly pledged to continue the work of national construction, the building of the nation within the respect of the democratic principles and rules. And I also pledged in my speech at the inauguration to enhance bilateral cooperation with all the friendly countries and affirm the presence of Niger on the international scene, particularly in the fight for building the Africa that we want for ourselves and the future generations. I want to reassure you that I will ensure throughout my term that my country, Niger, remains active in the establishment of partnerships and continental synergies for a more united and better integrated Africa. I would like to seize the opportunity of the 35th ordinary session of the Assembly of the Union to urge my colleagues to sustain sustained mobilization in the fight against terrorism and all the factors of violence that are, in fact, affecting our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome the progress made by our continent, particularly with the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. This instrument should serve to help us develop trade between our countries and put an end to this unacceptable situation, as pointed out by the African Development Bank, that intra-African trade represents only 16% of our external and foreign trade. For this, we should continue the technical discussions, but also pursue the establishment of the PIDA program, that is Infrastructure Development, and the Yamoussoukro Convention on Air Transport in Africa, as well as the speedy adoption of a harmonized clearance and financial clearance system. Coming from a country of the Sahel facing the impacts of climate change, food insecurity, desertification, floods, I cannot conclude my statement without making an appeal for the honoring of the commitments, that is, of those that are polluting the country and making global warming, and I was stated in Paris, Marrakesh and Glasgow. I express my appreciation to the good work that is being carried out by the chairperson of the Commission, Moussa Faki Mohamed. He is indeed leading this commission with competence and loyalty. May I encourage him and through him to all the members of his team. I want to congratulate also President Shisekedi for the work done as chairman of the union during 1 year, and wish full success to President Macky Sall, who was just elected as the chairman of the African Union. Long live African Union, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
I thank you, President Bazoum, President of Niger, and I also want to point out that we have some heads of state who have been re-elected, and on behalf of the Assembly, we want to congratulate them. President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, President Patrice Talon of Benin, President Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of the Congo, President Adama Barrow of the Gambia, and President Ismail Omar Guelleh of Djibouti. Now I want to give the floor to President Mengende of the Republic of Zambia. You have the floor, Mr. President.
Pour la suite, j'invite nos collègues à intervenir
I'd like
depuis leur
to
position.
invite my colleague to speak from where he is seated so that we can gain time.
Zambi, vous avez la parole.
My dear friend and colleague, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellency President Felix Shisekedi, President of the DRC and outgoing Chairman of the African Union, Your Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Republic and Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellencies, heads of states and government that are present here today, Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Chairperson, 2021 was a year during which Zambia, our country, lost its founding father, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda, and the people of Zambia honored his legacy of peace, indeed unity, by going to the elections, the polls, and ushered in a new government in the same year, our government. Chairperson, we welcome the theme for the 2022 meeting, which aligns with our own administration's key priorities. I mean development priorities, which is increasing the contribution of agriculture to economic growth. Africa, Chairperson, is sufficiently endowed to produce food that should be more than enough to satisfy the continent's nutrition, food security needs, and with increased value addition, it has the unmistakable potential to lift millions of our fellow Africans out of poverty. A problem we've been grappling with for years and years. It has to come to an end. Poverty makes us feel less human, and we should fight it with all the vigor. Chairperson, for our continent to achieve its objectives of economic growth, poverty reduction, and improving the lives of our people, we must be firmly committed to continental peace, security, and stability. What's going on around our continent is concerning many of us, and it's an issue all of us must be addressing with strength, with vigor. It would be true to say, in my own words, Chairperson, that instability anywhere is a threat to stability everywhere. That is a view we hold very, very strongly, and I shall repeat that held view. Instability anywhere is a threat to stability everywhere. Chairperson, we have a unique opportunity to be the generation of Africans and leaders that will actualize economic success with integration and change the African narrative once and for all. We must consider unacceptable the narrative of war, the narrative of instability, corruption, and poverty that has characterized our continent for far too long. This is unacceptable. It must not continue. We must change it, and we have the capacity to change this definition of our continent. It is time to embrace a new paradigm. Let us be anchored by trade, investment, of course, partnerships where we need this. Where there is peace and stability on our continent is the narrative we want. Where there is rule of law and respected by all of us in leadership as a starting point. We cannot expect our citizens to respect the rule of law when we, the leaders, have no iota of any respect for the rule of law. And that leads us into negative vices that have plagued our continent for far too long. We have to bring it to an end. We have the capacity to do that. Let us embrace the aspirations of the youth who desire skills, who desire jobs, business opportunities, and a chance to be heard, a chance to be involved, not once, but all the time. That is very important to us. Let us ensure that the resources of our continent have value added in them and never leave our shores in the raw form as has become a traditional ceremony for years and years. This is unacceptable. It generates us less value than we could if we value added our materials. And we are tired, we must be tired of talking about Africa's potential for years and years. We must actualize that potential. Chairperson, as I conclude, I am pleased to inform you, Your Excellencies, that Zambia is ready to host the 2022 Fourth Mid-Year Coordination in July in Lusaka, and we look forward to welcome all of you to our beautiful country. Chairperson, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention. God bless you all.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président Akende.
President Kende, President of the Republic of Zambia, for your statement. Dear colleagues, as part of our congratulations and on your behalf, I'd like to congratulate our colleague Dr. Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, who was brilliantly re-elected. And I would like to extend all our congratulations to Dr. Abiy Ahmed. I'm now pleased to give the floor to José Maria Neves of the Republic of Cabo Verde. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Excelências, Sr. Macky Sall, President da República do Senegal,
the President of the Republic of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union, heads of states, Your Majesties, heads of government and other representatives of member states, Mr. President, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, ladies and gentlemen, dear brothers and sisters, I would like to greet you on behalf of the people of Cape Verde and my own behalf, and I express the enormous honor that it is to me to attend for the very first time in the capacity of the President of the Republic of Cape Verde in this August Assembly. I would like to thank His Excellency the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, to the government and people of Ethiopia for the efforts to make possible the physical hosting of this summit in a context strongly marked by the restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as for thank you for the warm hospitality that was accorded to the Cape Verde delegation in this beautiful city of Addis Ababa. I'd like to thank and commend the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Shisekedi, for the exemplary leadership of the African Union during a difficult year of 2021. I also address my congratulations to His Excellency the President of the Republic of Senegal, Macky Sall, for assuming the chairmanship of our organization, and wish him all success in leading this union and accelerating the integration process of our continent. Humanity is facing its biggest threats during this last century. COVID-19 has had high costs to all countries, particularly to African countries. This crisis may represent an opportunity for Africa to engage in a profound reflection and position itself before this and other challenges that will certainly come in the future. Africa has got knowledge, talent, and sufficient resources to produce vaccines and other medicines, and therefore not be reliant on current contingencies and vulnerable when new pandemics emerge. I would like therefore to commend South Africa
for launching the first vaccine manufactured in Africa, and I hope that soon enough other African countries will also launch their vaccines. Africa will have a hard time, difficulties in bridging the financing gap to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and our Agenda 2063 only with public or governmental revenues. It is urgent to rethink our model for development finance in Africa, geared towards realizing the aspirations of these important agendas. If on the one hand the situation calls for the deepening of the expansion of our tax base in order to increase our capacity to fund public policies with our own resources, this also implies the modernization of mechanisms for the financing of our economy by the private sector, both domestic and external, and also fight illicit financial flows. Africa cannot alone have sufficient means to finance the measures for response and recovery from the economic crisis, the pandemic crisis, and climate crisis. There is a need to ensure complementary funding through other forms and sources of external funding, namely through foreign direct investment, international cooperation, appropriate external financial assistance, and the debt forgiveness or reconversion. I do express my concern for the constant threats to peace, security, and stability in our continent, namely in West Africa and the Sahel regions. I refer specifically to terrorism and the subversion of the constitutional order through coup d'etats that have undermined the continent. I'd like to address my full solidarity to the victims of terrorism, namely in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Northern Nigeria, and Mozambique. And I reaffirm strongly the condemnation to all terrorist acts and attempts to subvert the constitutional order, such as the one we've had in Sudan, Mali, Guinea-Conakry, Burkina Faso, and the recent attempt of coup d'etat in Guinea-Bissau. We need to strengthen African capacity to prevent and manage conflicts and strongly promote preventive diplomacy. We also should make our decisions more effective, and therefore the establishment of a multi-level governance system with an adequate division of labor between the African Union, regional organizations and member states with shared responsibilities. This will be a major step to realize the Agenda 2063 and the Africa we want. I believe that Africa has resources, talents, and imaginations to be one of the most important political and economical players in the 21st century. Cape Verde, within its responsibility as a small island and developing state, will always be present. Thank you very much for your attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président José Maria Neves de
Thank you,
République de Cabo Verde.
President of the Republic of Cape Verde. And I'm pleased to give the floor to President Cabo Verde of Sao Tome and Principe. Mr. President, you have the floor.
He's not there. Alors, je vais...
The President apparently is not on seat. I will now give the floor to the President Vavel Ramkalaven of the Seychelles. Mr. President, I recognize you.
Your Excellency, President Macky Sall, President of the African Union, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege and a pleasure to address this AU Assembly for the very first time since being elected by the Seychellois people as their President in October 2020. From the onset, I would like to reaffirm my personal commitment and that of my country to the values, principles, and ethos of the African Union. These very same values that we commonly share will shape the direction of our continent's agenda to reach our goal of attaining the Africa we want. I thank our host, the government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, for the hospitality extended to the Seychelles delegation. I would like to thank our outgoing chair, His Excellency President Felix Shisekedi, for his leadership and his achievements in what has been a very difficult year for all of us. I would also like to congratulate His Excellency President Macky Sall, our incoming President. You have our full support in implementing this year's theme, which is motivated by the emerging socio-economic dynamics that have impacted heavily on our continent, owing to the destructive effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the pandemic stretches into its third year, the global health crisis and its associated economic uncertainties have proved to be persistent and continue to pose a challenge to all of us. As long as Africa remains deprived of vaccines, the restrictions on our economic activities will certainly continue to affect our economic relief efforts. The disparity and inequality in accessing vaccines is not acceptable. It is an injustice, and it is morally wrong to accept that in February 2022, only 10% of the population of Africa have been fully vaccinated. We are faced with difficult choices, not least developing our own capacities to manufacture vaccines in Africa. In this regard, I wish to commend the research and development community from South Africa, Egypt, Rwanda, Senegal, and Mauritius, to name a few, for their forward-thinking approach to manufacture vaccines domestically. The supply chain disruptions during this pandemic have proved just how risky the dependency on importation of critical medical supplies, amongst other commodities, can be. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace, security, and good governance are undoubtedly the essential foundations that create enabling environments for progress and socio-economic development on our continent. Good governance facilitates economic growth, which in turn leads to the much-needed wealth creation to alleviate poverty and improve human development. Those essential foundations, those pillars of the rule of law, of democracy and human rights that shape our present and determine our future are under serious threat. They are being undermined by conflict, strife, insurgencies, and terrorist activities on our continent. They constitute an existential threat to us all. Not only must they be resolutely condemned, but they must, with equal vigor and determination, be combated and eliminated. I must therefore commend His Excellency President Ramaphosa for his undeterred and unwavering commitment towards the vision of a continent that is free from conflict. Let us collectively work towards silencing the guns once and for all. The climate crisis remains the biggest long-term threat facing our planet. The commitments taken in Glasgow are still not enough to achieve the 1.5-degree goal. All evidence points to the fact that small island developing states are particularly at risk from exposure to multiple and compound climate-related risks and with increasing global warming. Recent advances in research reveal greater impacts of sea level rise on coastal populations than originally estimated. With populations, agricultural lands, and infrastructure tending to be concentrated along the coastal zones, any rise in sea level will have significant and profound effects on our livelihood, our way of life, and indeed, our very existence. We, the islanders, contribute less than 1% of global GHG emissions. Yet, if the present situation endures, we will suffer disproportionately from the damaging impacts of climate change, with some of our islands disappearing. Seeds are victims. We refuse to pay the consequences for the irresponsible acts of others. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is certainly not too late for all of us to act on the risks we face and for us to pursue an innovative, sincere, and inclusive transition that protects humanity. More than ever, I am convinced that the African Union has the political will and commitment to lead by example. I thank you.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President Nkolavan of the Republic of Seychelles, for your message. We now give the floor to the President of the Republic of Malawi, Mr. Lazarus Salvera. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Mr. Macky Sall, Chairperson of the African Union and President of the Republic of Senegal, Your Excellency, Mr. Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, outgoing Chair of the African Union, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Muhammad, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as this is my first visit to this historic city since I became President of the Republic of Malawi, let me first express my sincere gratitude to the government and the people of Ethiopia for being such wonderful hosts. Your service to Africa in hosting this long-awaited assembly is both a restoration and a reminder of the mutual hospitality we have all been craving for during the socially isolating waves of COVID-19 pandemic. I would therefore like to also commend Your Excellency, Felix Antoine Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and outgoing Chair of the African Union, for convening this ordinary session of the Assembly and then handing over to the new Chair, His Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, whom I had the honor of interacting with yesterday on matters of mutual benefit to our nations, and I wish you both the very best in your leadership. The fact that we're here today is a testament to the solidarity and unity of our union. The pandemic has inflicted heavy losses on us, but we have mourned those losses together. It has disrupted the social fabric of our Ubuntu way of life, but we have held on to our shared humanity by finding solutions together. It has brought many of our interconnected economies to a grinding halt, but we worked hard to ratify the African Continental Free Trade Area so that we can bounce back together. We do need an environment in which guns have been silenced, and there is peace and security across the continent, with the rule of law being followed, democracy being consolidated, development being championed, and then the African people's dignity being upheld. We need to restore Africa's forests and landscapes. The issue of climate change continues to wreak its ravages across the continent, and particularly a couple of weeks ago, Tropical Storm Anna heavily afflicted its devastating impact on Malawi and Mozambique. But we must continue to be resilient. As I currently chair the Southern Africa Development Community, through which I work closely with the African Union within the framework of the AU Regional Economic Communities Coordination, I pledge to do my part to advance the Union's vision for the Africa we want within the context of Malawi, whose 2063 vision is inspired by the African Union's Agenda 2063. The Africa we want, a prosperous and united Africa in charge of our own destiny, is an idea I'm determined to pursue, and if need be, an idea I'm prepared to defend wherever it is threatened across the globe. I want to thank you for your attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President Lazarus Chairperson of the Republic of Malawi, for your statement.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to proceed with the launching of the theme of the African Union for the year 2022. I would like to invite the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission to take the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellencies, it is with the greatest pleasure and honor, and on behalf of all member states of the Union, that I proceed to introduce theme of the year that will focus on the extremely important subject of nutrition. Let me begin by first recognizing and commending President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, His Excellency Alassane Ouattara, who is also the African, the head of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, for the proposal that nutrition is endorsed as the theme of the African Union for the year 2022. The commemoration of 2022 as the Year of Nutrition and Food Security is welcome, given that the Assembly of the Union has been seized with the subject of nutrition since the days of its parent organization, the OAU. The progress that has been over the years in addressing malnutrition and improving food security across the continent is duly recognized. Further, the exceptional leadership of His Majesty King Letsi III of the Kingdom of Lesotho and the African Union champion for that has kept nutrition high on the policy agenda of member states. The decision of the Assembly on the choice of nutrition as the theme of the year is taking place in a difficult context as member states remain challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic that is affecting our populations and their livelihoods, especially in the areas of nutrition and food security. The African Union theme of the year for 2022 aims to maintain a strong political momentum on nutrition across the African continent. It is a unique opportunity to strengthen political commitment to end malnutrition in all its forms and to further improve food and security through the implementation of Malabo commitments and the goals and objectives of the Africa Regional Nutrition Strategy for the years 2016 to 2025. Human capital is key for development as it leads to improved lives for individuals, higher earnings, and improved incomes for countries. On behalf of the African Union, let me reiterate our commitment to promote human capital development in line with all the aspirations of Agenda 2063. This is a great opportunity for all stakeholders, including member states, regional economic communities, civil society organizations, the private sector, the UN and partners to use the opportunity to secure greater political commitment and investment in nutrition and to address the ongoing nutrition and food security challenges. Let me take this opportunity to recognize the good work of the Commission in preparation of the theme of the year for 2022, and also the great partnership and collaboration with all stakeholders, especially the Africa Development Bank that has made significant investments through the Africa Leaders Initiative in support of the continent's policy on nutrition and food security. It is my hope that all stakeholders and partners shall be sustained during the implementation of the roadmap for this theme during 2022 and beyond. I therefore humbly invite our leaders to launch for us the African Union theme for the year 2022 as follows: strengthening resilience in nutrition and food security on the African continent, strengthening agro-food systems, health and social protection systems for the acceleration of human, social, and economic capital development. I thank you.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
Thank you, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, for your presentation. I now, on behalf of the Assembly, I would like to extend our greetings of the King of Lesotho, the designated African champion of the African Union for the promotion of nutrition. I will now give the floor to the Office of the Secretary General for practical information. Thank you, Mr. President.
La photo de famille marquera.
We are going to have a group photograph that will mark the end of the opening ceremony of this 35th session of the Assembly. I would like to invite the protocol officers to take the necessary steps to guide Your Excellencies to the venue of the photograph. We are going to reconvene immediately thereafter in camera. In a closed session. So I would like to invite our guests, the media. I would like to inform them that the closed session shall not require their presence.
Je précise que la photo de famille est
let me indicate that the group photograph is for heads of states and heads of delegation. Thank you very much.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, pour votre information.
Ladies and gentlemen, for
Après la photo de famille,
our information, after the group photograph, we are going to have the lunch break, and we reconvene at 3 p.m. in a closed session. Thank you. Yeah.